Bellissima.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of November. Today, well, Arab countries are demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as the US Secretary of State continues his diplomatic tour of the Middle East and ground forces engage in heavy fighting. A month on now, there is seemingly no end in sight to the unfolding humanitarian catastrophe. Mark is live for us in Tel Aviv with the latest.
Well, the Hamas-run health ministry is claiming that 30 people have been killed in another Israeli airstrike on a refugee camp in central Gaza. The IDF says it's looking into those reports.
And we're exactly 1 year out from the US presidential elections. Who are the runners and riders, and what are their chances? We'll have all the latest analysis, and will President Biden be able to run a winning re-election campaign?
Able to communicate it in a way that is, let me say another way. With the nature, not a solid meeting, with the
Well, let us know what you think about that. And remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. It's Guy Fawkes Night tonight, where we remember, of course, the plot against the King and Parliament. How will you be celebrating? Perhaps in the rain. Again, do let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com.
And for that, Jonathan Vautry has your all-important weather.
An east-west split in our weather developing today and for Bonfire Night celebrations tonight. Join me later to find out what that means for you.
And then Aidan, of course, has all your sport.
Yes, good morning. Arsenal lose at Newcastle, and that leaves Mikel Arteta raging at VAR. And in cricket, England are put out of the World Cup by Australia.
Well, it's great that you're joining us this morning. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Let's go straight now to Gaza and Israel. In fact, in Gaza, 94 British nationals have actually been prevented from crossing the border into Egypt. Officials temporarily closed the Rafah crossing after accusations had been swirling around about Hamas infiltration amongst the injured.
The Foreign Office has been pressing for its reopening and expects a resumption within days.
Arab nations have demanded a ceasefire from the US Secretary of State as he heard their concerns in Jordan yesterday, an idea repeatedly rejected by the US and Israel.
And this comes as explosions rock the Lebanese border following Israeli airstrikes. The Lebanese terror group Hezbollah has threatened full-scale war if Israel escalates its violence.
So, our security editor, Mark White, has all the latest for you. Mark, can you actually sum up, what is the latest situation? There seems to be a lot going on suddenly.
Every day there are so many different developments. One of the latest is a strike on a refugee camp in central Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. This is the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza, where, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, 30 people have been killed. Now, the Israeli Defense Force have not commented on this other than to say that they are investigating those reports. And, of course, they reiterate, as they do with every strike where there are reports of civilian casualties, that, this is the modus operandi of Gaza, of the Hamas terrorist group. They entrench themselves throughout civil society in Gaza. They run Gaza. They're everywhere in civilian areas, in refugee camps, in hospitals, schools and kindergartens. So when they call in airstrikes, then there are often civilians caught up in this. But the Israelis say that, for weeks now, they have been urging the people of northern Gaza to get south, to head south to the relative safety of southern Gaza, out of the way of the most intense of the bombing. And to that end, actually, the Salah al-Din main road, the main highway from northern Gaza to southern Gaza, was open just for a brief 3 hours yesterday to allow as many residents as could manage to get south. But what the IDF are saying is that just an hour or two into the opening of this highway, remember there are IDF troops on the ground in that area now, the Hamas terrorists took advantage of this and ambushed and attacked IDF forces there along this highway.
Yesterday we were speaking about Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah stopped short of declaring all-out war on Israel, but we've seen overnight dramatic pictures of a huge bombing operation by the IDF inside Lebanon. Might that escalate things to the north?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're talking about the double explosion that you see on the video, that's actually Hezbollah firing more sophisticated rockets at an Israeli Defense Force post, and the Israelis then responded by bombing those Hezbollah positions. I think this was always the fear from Hassan Nasrallah's speech, that although he's not committing to going into the war fully, He doesn't have to. He just needs to signal an uptick in these attacks, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And that causes very significant problems for the Israelis, having to commit tens of thousands of troops to the northern border. But on top of that, there are dozens of communities along that northern border who have had to evacuate and move into the likes of Tel Aviv. Now, that is not sustainable over the long term. So all the while, you know, there is the possibility of escalation and a determination from Israel to get a solution to the northern border issue as well, because the longer it drags on, the more they have hundreds of thousands now of displaced people in their own country as well.
And Mark, can you explain what happened yesterday? Because we were expecting more people to be allowed out through the Rafah crossing into Egypt, and we were particularly expecting more British nationals to come, but nothing happened, did it?
Yeah, well, it's a very difficult situation down on that crossing, and people think it's just a matter of opening the crossing and letting those on the list through. But Israel needs real guarantees that the people crossing that border are who they say they are, and not Hamas terrorists trying to sneak out of the country into Egypt and to regroup. And there is real concern that some of the injured who were taken over in ambulances, for instance, were actually fighters from Hamas and not civilian casualties. So I think concerns over that led to issues at the border, which meant there were no crossings. And that's deeply disappointing, of course, for the British government, knowing that there were 88 British nationals on a list of about 112 related to the UK yesterday. We know that any given day anyway, a good proportion of these people don't turn up for a variety of reasons, usually because of the safety concerns that they have. But whoever was there and tried to cross yesterday didn't get to cross. I should also just mention the fact that Hamas in the Gaza Strip still, despite all of the relentless air and ground strikes from the IDF, still has a very significant capacity. Here in Tel Aviv, we come under a very significant rocket attack last night. Now, it wasn't immediately in our central sector, so our head of security, Lawrence, was able at the back there, Maher was able at the back of the hotel that we're in on his balcony to get the shots of those Iron Dome missiles going up to intercept the rockets. And it really just does show you the significant weaponry that Hamas still has, and also the capability and the determination to launch these missiles towards Israel.
Really significant point there about the identity of those attempting to cross from the Rafah crossing into Egypt. We've had security expert Chip Chapman in the studio before saying it's entirely plausible that Hamas will attempt to melt into the civilian population, to flee the country, to escape, to regroup outside. And so there's an incredibly complicated procedure of vetting people, and especially fleeing war-torn zones. They may have no identification. We may not know who they are. So it's an incredibly precarious situation, isn't it, down there?
Yeah, I mean, they are off the people, you know, and they, you know, are part and parcel of everyday life in Gaza. They run Gaza. The Hamas fighters are recruited from the people of Gaza. They're there, and yes, you're right. It's the perfect excuse in a war zone to say you have no documentation when you present yourself in the back of an ambulance at the border badly injured, and it's very difficult for the authorities to then get a handle on who exactly you are. So that's why there is confusion and concern, in the same way that there's constant confusion and concern about the aid supplies coming in. The Israelis are very concerned that because Hamas controls Gaza, that ultimately, if it wants to, it can get its hands on those supplies coming through. And that's why, thus far, we're not seeing fuel supplies going into Gaza, because Israel says it will just go straight down into those tunnels and be used in the manufacturing of weapons and those rockets that are fired constantly towards Israel.
Mark, we'll leave it there for the moment and revisit you a bit later on in the programme. Thanks very much indeed. That's Mark White there in Tel Aviv for us. It's 11 minutes past 6. Now, the fighting might be in the Middle East, but its effects, of course, are global.
Back home in Britain, protests have been continuing on the streets of London and elsewhere as people call for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the occupation.
Tensions have been rising every weekend. It's built, hasn't it, over the last 4 weeks as the protests continue. Well, our political correspondent Catherine Forster went along to this demonstration in the capital.
A really very unpleasant atmosphere here now at the Cenotaph as night begins to fall. We've got people with Union Jack flags on the right-hand side who've been here all day. It had been quite good-natured, but now we've got pro-Palestinian demonstrators on the left, and they're basically goading each other. We had a Palestinian supporter walked past the guys with the Union Jacks. There was a load of abuse. He threatened to kill them. I can't repeat the exact words he used, and they're shouting abuse at him. The police really have got their hands full trying to keep control here now.
That's Catherine Forster there. Just on that subject, actually, a bit later on in the programme, we're going to be talking to the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Ask him what his thoughts are about how things should be policed, particularly next weekend, which, as we know, is both Armistice Day and then Remembrance Sunday. He'll be on the programme a bit later on.
1,300 cops on duty yesterday, 29 arrests, and very much a fear that things may be escalating ahead of next week, and let's hope that doesn't happen.
Meanwhile, let's look over the pond now, because exactly 1 year from now, voters in the United States will be heading to their polling stations to elect a new president.
And many are speculating that 2024 may be a rerun of the 2020 election with roles reversed, with incumbent President Joe Biden taking on his former rival Donald Trump. But then a lot can change in a year.
Well, joining us now is the former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Friend of the programme now, Steve Gill. Lovely to see you. Thanks very much. It's amazing to think that it's a year from now and still we don't know really who the candidates are. But it is looking, don't you think, like Biden v. Trump again?
Yeah, it's going to be like Groundhog Day, that movie where we're just going to kind of re-go through the same thing. I got to tell you guys, I've been involved in this business as a consultant, candidate, running campaigns for 4 decades. This is the craziest setting I've ever seen, and it's going to be like a roller coaster ride with a lot of twists and turns that we can't foresee. As Mark was reporting from Gaza, what's happening there, what's happening in London with the protests, certainly having an impact here. And Joe Biden is really trying to thread the needle of dispute within his own Democratic Party, trying not to alienate his Jewish supporters and Jewish donors, and at the same time not alienate the Muslim base. I think he got about 79% of the Muslim vote 4 years ago. Some polls are showing that his support among Muslim voters in the U.S. is down to about 17%. So what's going on in Gaza is clearly going to have an impact here in the U.S. elections.
Robert Kennedy Jr., is he just, I mean, he's trying to put himself forward as an independent candidate. Is he just interesting, or do you think he could have some sort of influence?
I think he'll definitely have some influence, if only because of his last name and the Kennedy legacy. What's interesting is that as he takes firm positions on policy issues, he's going to lose votes, I think, on both sides of the political aisle. He's recently come out in favor of reparations for African Americans for slavery 200 years ago. He has been strongly opposed to Second Amendment rights. That's going to bleed off some of the, Trump or Republican voters from him. At the same time as he takes some of his anti-vax positions, some of his other economic positions, he's going to lose support, I think, on the left. So at the end of the day, I think he's kind of at a high watermark of his polling right now that will start to diminish as people on both sides realize he's not exactly what they think he is.
Steve Gill, we've got a lot to talk about in the next year. Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's 6:15, and you're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News. And if you've just joined us, a reminder here of some of the top stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
And Arab countries demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as the US Secretary of State continues his diplomatic tour of the Middle East and ground forces engage in heavy fighting.
And as we were listening, we are exactly 1 year out from the US presidential elections. Who are the runners and riders? What are their chances? We'll keep you up to date.
And remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. Yes, it's Guy Fawkes night, where we remember the plot against the King and Parliament, of course. Will you be celebrating it? Let us know how. gbviews@gbnews.com.
And the row over pro-Palestine protests continue, with the Home Secretary now saying that she won't hesitate to act if police need stronger powers to deal with what she calls utterly odious behaviour at demonstrations. Now, I don't know whether you've sort of gotten out of bed and looked out the window, but it's bleak out there. Very, very wet. Where I was, the fog is unbelievable. And if there are going to be bonfires around tonight, mixed with the fog, you're not going to be able to see a thing. I don't know. And it may be worse where you're living, because there are dozens of flood warnings remaining in place across England after days of heavy rain. The majority of warnings are along the south coast now, where the Met Office has warned that heavy rain was falling on utterly saturated ground yesterday.
Yeah, and this comes after Storm Ciarán battered the south coast and the Channel Islands with heavy rain and gusts of up to 100 miles an hour on Thursday, leaving nearly 150,000 homes without power.
Well, joining us now, weather journalist Nathan Rao. It's lovely to see you.
Good morning.
Except that, you know, usually it means there's something up with the weather when we see you this early.
And here I am again, there's something up with the weather.
I mean, this rain just will not stop. Everybody's getting really depressed by it, let alone the people whose homes are affected by floodwater.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, there are still flood warnings in place. These are from the Environment Agency. There are actually 43 flood warnings and 171 flood alerts in place, and that's across the southern flank of England, across the UK. Now, the good news is that Storm Ciarán, which has caused a lot of damage, has now passed. This system has now passed. The bad news is we are still in a very unsettled pattern of weather, and there's still more rain on the way.
I mean, it's this business of the ground being utterly saturated. There's nowhere now for the water to go.
Yes, and this is why these flood warnings are still in place, and I would anticipate these flood warnings will still be in place throughout the week, because we are going to get more rain, particularly in the west of the country, actually. After today has passed, the rain will move through and it's coming in from the west. But as you said, the ground is saturated across swathes of certainly southern and southwestern UK, and any rain on top of that is going to keep on exacerbating this problem with flooding, which Storm Ciarán really triggered from last week. So not good news for that situation. But there are no Met Office weather warnings in place at the moment. Today is the first day, I think, for about 3 days, there are no flood warnings or anything, so no rain warnings in place from the Met Office, so a bit quieter.
Tonight, of course, is bonfire night, and not the ideal situation, it has to be said, for getting a fire going. In fact, where I was last night, you'd have struggled to even light a firework. What's the picture across the UK looking like for rain tonight when it matters during the displays?
Right. Throughout today, the rain is going to clear from the east, and it's going to be mainly the west. So if you're in the east of the country, that's Kent, London, East Anglia, all those sort of places down the eastern coast of the country and sort of central to east. So you take the East Midlands and go eastwards, you're probably going to be better off than if you are in the west, because the west is going to be pretty much in the firing line for more rain, really. Yeah. They are where the lows, the unsettled weather is coming in from, and that's where it's going to be. That said, we're in a generally unsettled pattern. I should mention, actually, in the west there could be thundery showers as well, so lots of bangs going off there. I know, terrible.
It might be the only bangs going off, actually.
Maybe it is,
because I can't see how you could have an enjoyable bonfire night tonight.
Yeah, but
if
take
it's
a
this
brolly
wet.
in. Yeah, I mean, take a brolly and run up.
It's not the same, though, is it?
Not really.
And as you said, I mean, how do you light a bonfire in this sort of weather?
Well, what you shouldn't do is what I did many years ago, and use a gallon of 4-star.
Yeah, don't do that.
Not a good idea. Don't do that.
But it's, in terms of the weather, it's been quite an extraordinary week of weather. I mean, we are in storm season, and we do obviously get storms at this time of year, but Storm Ciarán was particularly aggressive. It deepened and strengthened very, very rapidly, and it hit most of its impact was sort of across the Channel Islands, where you saw those 100-mile-per-hour winds. Had it been slightly further north, we would have got that in London and across England, so we were quite lucky. Another storm, Storm Domingo, this is not a UK named storm, this is a European named storm, moved across yesterday. That we got the tail end of that in the UK with more rain. That is now cleared. So we're going into a slightly better but still unsettled picture.
Domingo.
Domingo, yes, that was named by the Spanish meteorological authorities.
But it's
not
still
one of
a
ours.
D. So
it's still a D. Our next D is Debbie.
Debbie. Yeah.
Our next D is Debbie. So it's slightly confusing. There is no Debbie on the forecast at the moment.
I was going to say, do you guys all coordinate as to how to name, or is it just coincidence that both Europe and Britain are on a D?
Yeah, that was a coincidence. It's actually very interesting how the storm names work. So our storm systems are named by the Met Office and Met Éireann, and it depends who gets it first or who's likely to get it first, who grabs the name.
Yeah.
The Spanish storms are named separately from us, but if they do come close enough to us, sometimes we'll adopt that name.
Yeah.
It's all quite messy, but we're still on C and we're waiting for Debbie.
There's no doubt to me that the weather's got worse since you started naming storms.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't it?
I think they just seem to be more.
I suppose you just feel it more personally, maybe.
Probably, yes.
OK, well, that's great. Thank you very much for bringing us up
Welcome.
to date with the general sort of weather picture, Nathan. Thank you. But I tell you what we ought to do at 22 minutes past 6 now is have a detailed look at the weather forecast for you, wherever you live at the moment, for today. So let's go to that now. Your weather.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a bit of a misty, murky start for some of us. Fog will be slow to clear in places, but it will eventually lift thanks to this westerly airflow that's going to start streaming its way in as low pressure drifts off to the east. This westerly airflow as well, though, pushing in showers for western districts, could be quite heavy at times with rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail as well. A few showers lingering across the eastern coast as well this morning, but into the afternoon it is going to be the east that stays driest with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Quite breezy around coastal areas of England and Wales, but temperatures further inland around 10-14 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in the sunnier spots. For any firework shows this evening, generally quite clear conditions further towards the east, but still catering for those showers in the west on and off throughout the night. A few though just pushing across the Channel Islands into southeast England as we head later on in the night as well. Underneath the starry skies though, temperatures will be dropping off quite a lot. Chilly for most of us, but particularly so for parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, where a touch of frost is possible. And again, there will be some fog lingering throughout Monday morning. But generally on the whole, it is another east-west split on Monday. Showers continuing to push in from the west, heavy at times. Eastern air is largely dry, but we could see some eventually pushing their way into East Midlands, parts of southeast England as well. Temperatures once again 10-14 degrees Celsius, but a touch fresher where you're caught in the relatively breezy conditions. Showery once again on Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives for Wednesday. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
And coming up, we'll have all of your sport headlines with Aidan McGee. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
26 minutes past 6 already. Aidan's here with the sport. Morning.
Good morning to you both.
Aidan, it's got to be said, Arsenal went to Newcastle yesterday and it all kicked off over yet another dodgy VAR decision.
Again, Martin, we're just talking about VAR week in, week out. It's been the case almost since its inception back in 2019. I remember sitting at Norwich back in December of 2019. We had 7 minutes. I was commentating on this. It was difficult. I had to commentate on no action, so I couldn't see anything because it took 7 minutes to come to a decision. I thought, soon enough they'll line this out. It would get better. And yesterday, another example, 4 minutes to disallow a goal. We should say, and we mentioned it off camera just there, I think Newcastle were good for the win. But just look at the language that Mikel Arteta used yesterday. It was unbecoming of a football manager. I mean, yes, OK, they get heads up sometimes, but let's have a look at this. I mean, embarrassing, disgrace, sick. We lost the match because of the clear and obvious decisions that were made. It was embarrassing, a disgrace. That's what it is, a disgrace. If you cannot imagine the amount of messages I've got stating that this cannot continue, I'm wasting my time. I feel embarrassed to be part of this.
Now, you could say sour grapes, though they drop points, he's under a huge amount of pressure, but also a lot of football fans are talking about this all the time. VAR was meant to help the game. Instead, it's become a barrier to the enjoyment. They seem to get it wrong all the time. And surely the way is just to go back to the good old days of refs making dodgy calls, but over a season it balances out.
Well, yeah, you could go back to that. Of course you could. I mean, if we're inventing football now, though, would we do it without technology? It seems to work well in rugby. It works well in cricket. It works well in football in other countries. It worked well at the World Cup.
But we never wanted it, did we?
No, I disagree with that. I think a lot of people did want it. The only problem was that this isn't new technology, Anne. This stuff could have been done 20, 30 years ago. It was just a monitor. It's people looking at a screen. It's about the human intervention here. The people making the decisions are clearly not quite up to it. They don't really understand the nuances of the game. There's an argument for ex-professional players coming into it, the ones who don't quite make it in the game, or maybe the people who have finished their career, who have a bit more of an understanding of tackles and incidents and that kind of stuff.
Yesterday, I mean, I watched it in a boozer.
Yes.
Right, and everybody could tell that ball was out when the Newcastle player kicked it back in. Everybody could tell that the Toon player who shoved the Arsenal player, they had both hands on.
Well, there were three incidents. There were three instances in the goal. It was whether the ball crossed the line before it was crossed. There was the double-handed foul on the back of Gabriel by Joe Linton, and then it was whether Anthony Gordon was offside. It just seems, Anne, as if people are sitting in a booth in a car park somewhere, and they're trying to look for ways to disallow a goal, because if they don't, they think that someone will go back and say, well, you should have chalked that one off.
No, you're right.
It's just not.
It's a good job for ex-professionals who aren't good enough to take up the in the commentary box. You know, they could go into VAR.
I'll tell you what would be good.
And then people would respect their decisions more.
they would.
All those young people who are kicked out of academies every year because the standard of football is so high, maybe they could be reintroduced to the game or kept in the game by retraining either as referees or as assistants or people to work in the VAR
what
booth.
You get there is a more sympathetic decision based around knowledge of the game and the flow of the game, rather than this kind of slide rule, algorithmic, sort of robotic destruction of fun.
But we did create this problem ourselves. We wanted to strive for absolute perfection when it came to VAR decisions, when it came to officiating matches. We wanted to micro referee, and that's what we were calling it. Every little decision was scrutinised, and so referees, you know, they supported the advent of VAR because they thought, well, we can actually defer this decision now. We can just say, oh, actually, you know, I didn't really see that or I missed it, so I can refer to the VAR. They'll get it right. If they get it wrong, then I can blame them.
Yeah, true, yes, but it does slow up the game.
Oh, hugely. I mean, look, we don't have natural breaks in football as well, the same as you would have in, say, NFL, American football, or in rugby, or even in cricket.
And the thing about this is other countries get it right and we get it so wrong. Well, it's the same technology.
Yeah, I just remember when they first brought it in, it was so contentious, wasn't it? Yeah. And I just wonder whether there's a bit of willfulness
these aren't teething problems anymore, and that was 4 years ago.
I tell you what, come back in a minute, because it's 6:30, so let's just give you a few reminders of what the top stories are this morning.
And Arab countries demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as the US Secretary of State continues his diplomatic tour of the Middle East and ground forces engage in heavy fighting.
And we're exactly 1 year out from the US presidential elections. Who are the runners and riders? What are their chances? We'll bring you the very latest analysis.
And remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. Of course, it's Guy Fawkes night tonight, where we remember the plot against the King and Parliament. Will you be out celebrating? Let us know where, let us know how. GB Views at gbnews.com.
And meanwhile, the row over pro-Palestine protests continue, with the Home Secretary now saying that she won't hesitate to act if police need stronger powers to deal with what she calls utterly odious behaviour at demonstrations. We'll be looking at that in more detail in just a bit.
And passengers are paying more and more to travel on the rail system since it was privatised, with over 30 billion quid having leaked out of the system since 1993, and that's according to the RMT union.
And then, after Number 10 confirms the Renters Reform Bill will be in the King's Speech, Labour vows to deliver more action on housing in their first 6 months than the Tories have delivered in the past 6 years. We were showing fireworks there as we were talking politics, but then I suppose, you know, that works, doesn't it?
I think Keir Starmer's probably so excited about his housing plan, he's letting off a few rockets.
Yeah,
fair play. Anyway, Aidan McGee is still with us here in the studio. We've dealt with VAR. Now let's look at another depressing story, really. England cricket, absolute nightmare. What the hell happened?
Well, look, I mean, it's been terrible ever since they arrived in India about a month ago. It's been absolutely awful as a defence. I can't think of a worse defence of a trophy, of a tournament, if you like. You know, they won it in such great style back in 2019 with the Super Over and everything in this country, and then they lose by 33 runs yesterday against Australia in Ahmedabad, and it's bad to go out against Australia anyway, but to be honest, the writing was already on the wall. And then it raises a question. I mean, like, you know, Butler, Livingston, Bairstow, 3 runs between them. These guys who are in their 30s will probably get central contracts when Rob Key decides on it in a few weeks' time. England are bottom of their group, and the misery doesn't end there because they've got 2 matches still to come. If they don't finish in the top 8 here in this list, in this league table, they don't even qualify for the Champions Trophy, and that's complete embarrassment. There was a problem last summer. They didn't really, because of the Ashes and everything, they didn't really get enough 50-over practice, and so. But then again, you can say, well, there were teams at the tournament who haven't had much 50-over practice either, and they're making England look distinctly amateurish. Yeah, and I watched this in the pub. There's a theme emerging, isn't there? But
yeah, the last thing you watched was in a pub.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this was on my way home after my shift yesterday.
It's a long trip home.
No, that's what I keep telling the missus. Storm Kieran blew me through the door. But on a serious point, Australia looked so comfortable against England. They're just dinking it to the boundary, and England looked crestfallen. They look downtrodden. They look like a team that's really, really lost their mojo, Aidan.
They do, but they looked also as if they're not. I mean, they were pretty much out anyway. I mean, it was the result as a result of the New Zealand, Pakistan, and as well as what's happened over the last 4 weeks. They look as if they don't want to be there, Martin. That's the issue. And they were never looked up for this World Cup anyway. It's almost like some of these players who are still surviving off the Owen Morgan regime, or the era, if you like, a few years ago. Sometimes you think, look, they've won this tournament already. Where is the real appetite to defend it, having done it previously? You know, I think it was such a big thing when it happened last time. And I just don't think this was doomed to failure from the beginning of this tournament.
Things looking worse, of course.
Sorry, for England, not for the tournament.
Things looking worse, of course, because like Ben Stokes having surgery, so he's going to be out for quite some time.
He is, yeah.
He's the talisman.
He is. He's a quick healer, but then if we get to him, he thinks he's going to be ready probably by end of January. I think that looks very ambitious for the kind of injury he has. It's a recurring knee injury as well.
And before we say goodbye to you and thank you, sorry, I didn't want to cut you short. Manchester United won a game yesterday.
I know. Well, I was going to say that because we discussed them to death almost yesterday, didn't we? Over 3 sessions. Didn't get mentioned this morning because that's how quickly football moves on. But yeah, they did. They won in the last minute, and Bruno Fernandes, much criticised as the captain, not really befitting of the status of a captain. He's not that kind of personality. Yet he rescues the game yesterday, just down the road from here in Fulham. And so that gets this. The United do this actually. They have a period where they have some pretty average results, or pretty poor results actually, but they seem to be able to drag one out when it really matters, and that might take the pressure off them just for a little while. But they didn't play well, and Erik ten Hag is still under scrutiny. There's no
so they were lucky.
They were lucky.
Well, I wouldn't say lucky. If the goal, just because a goal happens late in the game, to me that's not lucky because the game isn't over till the whistle.
Well, I bumped into a bunch of very damp Fulham fans who felt.
In the pub?
Yes, it was. They felt they were completely robbed. They felt they were completely robbed because Fulham outplayed them, and then they dinged it in the last kick of the game, and they were hoping to see the United gaffer get kicked out at Craven Cottage.
Yeah, I guess that would have been fun for them, wouldn't it? But then if you look at the winning goal and the build-up to it, there are about 5 different mistakes made by about 4 different players, so they had it coming to them, to be perfectly honest. If you can't defend your line at a very basic level, elementary level like that, then don't be surprised if a player of Fernandes' calibre will punish you, and that's exactly what happened.
Great stuff, Aidan McGee. Always a pleasure.
See you in a bit.
Yes.
And it's nice to hear how you get home as well. So. crawling all the way home. Actually, it's funny because we were talking about this yesterday, weren't we? And I don't know if, as you're watching at the moment, if you are a shift worker.
Yeah.
But the one thing you think about at the end of your shift is how you're going to get to sleep and when, isn't it?
That's right.
And we both reckon that a little drinky does help, and then you can immediately conk out.
And the fact of the matter is, because we both get up, what time do you get up? 2 in the morning?
2:15, yeah.
Well, I get up at 3, so by the time I knock off at 10, it's lunch.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's that's my defence. I got home once after this programme and poured myself a drink, and my son said, "Mum, it's 10:30 in the morning." No, to me, it's 7 o'clock in the evening.
You're on kind of Bangkok time.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's my defence. One little drinky, and then I zonk out for. How do you cope if you're a shift worker? Perhaps you're in a nurse or somebody like that who are constantly having to maybe change shifts as well. How do you guarantee a good sleep, or do you nap in the middle of the day and then wake up again later? That's what I do, and I'm not terribly sure it's good for you.
And there'll be a lot of people just watching this show now who've been in on a night shift.
Yeah, maybe you've just got in.
Yeah, you might be having a nice little nightcap before a nap, and when in Rome.
Yeah.
Why not?
Tell us your secrets. Yes, we'd love to know. gbviews@gbnews.com. Right, we'll be gone for a couple of moments right now, so you can go and put the kettle on. But coming up, government officials have drawn up controversial proposals to broaden the definition of extremism. And we'll be looking at that and more in Headline Makers. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new
It's your new t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Lovely to be with you this morning. It's just coming up very nearly to 22:07. We're going to have a look through the papers now, and let's have a look at the front pages, starting with the Sunday Times. They're leading with Israeli troops pushing into Gaza City in a hunt for Hamas.
And meanwhile, The Observer leads with government officials trying to broaden the definition of extremism.
And the Mail on Sunday continues to lead on Nadine Dorris's serialised book.
And Sunday Telegraph reports on a Met police advisor leading a From the River to the Sea chant.
And the Daily Star on Sunday lead with the freeing of Woolly, Britain's loneliest sheep. Lamshank Redemption is the headline. It's a pretty good one, actually.
It is good.
Isn't
It's
it?
not bad, yeah.
OK, joining us to go through some of the day's headlines, broadcaster Claire Muldoon and writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. And thank you so much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Claire, I believe we're kicking off with that story we just mentioned on the front of the Telegraph today. A hard-left activist who was filmed leading chants from the river to the sea.
Yeah, well, look, this obviously it's made the front page, but for me, this is the issue with diversity, inclusion in committees that governments have set up, because it's good to have a wide vista, lots of different views that will hopefully taper either end of the extremist views, shall we say. But this is where the line is drawn for me. When they're sitting behind closed doors and then they can give off opinions, they can give an understanding, they can give an undercurrent as to why people feel the way they do. But I'm sorry, you cannot do it in your position using defamatory language, as it has been said by the government that it is. It's incisive language, it's incendiary. This chap is a lawyer. OK, he's a solicitor. He's also an advisor to the Met Police. So when we've got that at that level, producing content like this, for me, it's abhorrent on many levels.
It does seem somewhat confusing that somebody who's advising the police on extremism is using a phrase which the government itself
has said is incendiary.
Is promoting extremism.
It's as you said, surely they're entitled to lots of different opinions inside the meeting room. But once they come out, there has to be one way forward.
Exactly.
And that's what, don't you think, is causing a lot of problems for the police? Because whatever they do, they're looking back for, they're looking behind them for some support, and they don't really know what they're meant to be doing if they're getting
there's no singular piece of evidence to suggest that the Met, and we're talking about the Met here, so excuse the rest of the police forces in the UK, the Met need serious guidance. They need serious rooting out of everything that's wrong at the moment with the Met, and we need to do something about it. They need to do something about it. Our elected members of Parliament must do something about it.
Yeah, I agree. Emma, maybe it's good to cut to your story on The Observer here, which ties in quite nicely. We mentioned it in the front page there. Revealed plan to brand anyone undermining the UK as extremists.
Exactly, and this links quite well with Claire's first story. This is Michael Gove's department, the Department for Levelling Up Communities and Housing. I'm not quite sure why he's leading anti-extremism legislation, but he is. Anyway, they have deeply controversial new plans, which I think we've heard about a few days ago as well, which would brand anyone who undermines... extremism would be branded anyone who undermines the country's institutions and its values. So it's really broadening the definition of what extremism means. This is absolutely at the forefront of the debate at the moment. What can you say? What can you not say? What is legitimate protest? What is free speech? What is deeply offensive? What is dangerous? What is incitement? Lots of people, lots of civil rights groups, according to The Observer, of course, are calling this a crackdown on freedom of speech, that they're saying that many legitimate groups, many legitimate individuals will be branded as extremists.
Isn't part of the problem, is particularly with what we're seeing with the Palestinian fallout, is that no one seems to know what words are offensive or aren't anymore.
And
for example, jihad is a really...
Has many interpretations.
But I would think, in the context of post-war Hamas terrorism, jihad's pretty clear.
But if you're... No, but people are saying it's struggle and other people are saying it's holy war. Is there an element of violence in that? It really does depend on your interpretation. However it's meant, it can then be, people can, I suppose, change
nuanced.
Change the nuance of how they meant it if they are then pulled up.
Well, Martin, you just said there, I thought, or I think, the problem is even now policing's moving that one step further to the police of thought. We would like to think we lived in an environment where we have democratic freedom of speech. My goodness me, what are we celebrating next week? What are we remembering next week because of that? And that underpins that. The thing that I've got the issue with is the fact that common sense appears to have been let out the window, completely gone. If someone's offended, we take the place of the one who is offended without actually trying to tease out, have rational conversation and debate about what is offence and what's meant to be offended.
And also,
big difference.
Particularly within academia, there is a definite groupthink. For example, they're more likely, you would have to say, to be of the left-leaning nature. They're more likely to be sympathetic towards the Palestinian cause, and they're advising the police on language. So therefore, we can see a dichotomy straight away where they think certain certain types of language isn't offensive.
And I think there's a pretty clear consensus.
Let's do a bit more about that in a minute, but at 6:45, let me just, if you've joined us, for instance, you'll need to know what the top stories are this morning.
Yeah, Arab countries demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as the US Secretary of State continues his diplomatic tour of the Middle East and ground forces engage in heavy fighting.
And we're exactly 1 year out from the US presidential elections. Who are the runners and riders? We'll be discussing that for the next year.
And remember, the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. Of course, it's Guy Fawkes Night, where we remember the plot against the King and Parliament. Will you be out celebrating? Let us know how and where. gbviews@gbnews.com.
And the row over pro-Palestine protests continue at home, with the Home Secretary now saying that she won't hesitate to act if police need stronger powers to deal with what she's calling utterly odious behaviour at demonstrations. We'll look at that in more detail, probably in the next few seconds. Let's do exactly that with broadcaster Claire Muldoon and writer and journalist Emma Wolfe, who is still with us here. What do you think of the way Suella Braverman, the language she's using and the way she appears to be taking a very strong line?
She is, but I don't think it's going to work. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to politicise the Conservatives at the moment, which are failing in the polls. They're not popular. Sunak's not an elected Prime Minister. All this rhetoric and all this narrative is feeding into the public, and the public are sick of it now. We've now got this in our hands. There is no straight direction, and I fear for the Met Police, because if the laws change again, they've got so many laws to remember. Yes. How on earth can they enforce a law that they don't particularly have any understanding of exactly what it is?
Isn't it more to the point, though, that tough talk is one thing, but we're all looking ahead now, aren't we, to next Saturday?
Exactly. Well, they are.
To what this means on the streets, especially at the Cenotaph. We saw Catherine Forster. It's already getting fruity out there. What's going to happen, or what should happen, do you believe, next Saturday?
I think that we need to be clear. You're exactly right, Martin. I was just thinking, I agree with Claire, but I think there's no time now for changing laws. It doesn't matter whatsoever.
Exactly.
I think we need to see action on what is going to happen next Saturday, and I think most people who respect, who think of our heritage and think of the brave, brave people who gave their life for our country, agree, even if these Palestinian protests are allowed to continue every weekend, feel that it should not happen next weekend, that is a day of remembrance.
Yes, actually,
Armistice Day is a sacred day, and those monuments should not be risked or desecrated, and that we need, as we lead up to this week, honestly, it's febrile. It's very, very
Yes, it is febrile, isn't it? One of the opinion writers in one of the papers today says, just because you have the right, and we all want...
but timing,
have the,
not
yes,
that
exactly.
day.
Just because you have the right to protest, maybe pull back and think.
Exactly.
Next weekend is not the time to do it.
Yeah.
Even if it's an operational thing and the police say, look, we simply can't keep Armistice Day safe and have hundreds of thousands of people.
And
but it's going to be targeted.
Central to this, if we're making the case for multiculturalism, then isn't this the time when the
Mutual
British
respect.
culture, the armistice culture, the culture of remembering our war dead, is respected by all cultures?
Of course, because it was all cultures and all races and all creeds and all religions that fought in the First and Second World War from this country. So regardless of how you pray or who you pray to, souls were lost, human beings were killed. You know, for us to have democratic free speech.
And Britain is still Britain. That's not racist to say that. And I think that people should be able to fly the Union Jack next weekend. I think poppy sellers should be able to sell their poppies without being besieged by Palestinian flags. And I'm not anti-Palestinian, but I think they should be able to commemorate the armistice.
Yeah. Now, Suella Braverman has said if anyone does do something terrible to the Cenotaph or any other war memorial or desecrates it or causes problems, they will be in jail before their feet have touched the ground. Now, she has promised that, but will the police be able to actually carry that out?
I doubt it. I doubt it. But in all of this, just thank God that Queen Elizabeth isn't here to witness this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, no, totally. And we did a GB News People's poll yesterday, and we found that I think it was only 70% of the British public don't have any faith in the Metropolitan Police to even enforce these rules. There's a feeling that the police don't know what the laws are, they don't want to enforce them, and at some point the mob may outnumber them.
Yeah.
That's the real risk.
Can I change gear?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Please
ask
do.
you about Nadine Dorris's book, which is being serialised starting now in the Mail on Sunday. And I don't know whether to give it 5 minutes of my life to read
look,
or not.
I'll give you a summary.
I don't know whether to believe anything she writes or not.
I'll give you a summary, and it'll be 5 seconds.
Oh, yes, please.
There we go. And you can save yourself probably $19.99, $24.99. I don't know how much it costs. The summary is it's a serialisation of a book, so they've put all the exciting stuff in the first weekend. There'll be nothing more to come. Lots of sleaze within the Tory party, alleged Tory MPs who had been raping and abusing women were... The victims were being paid for private treatment. Jake Berry, the former ex-Tory party chairman, who actually left under Liz Truss's destruction.
Yes.
Yeah, so he also has a beef. Obviously, Nadine Dorris's book is all about the plot. It's called The Plot, and it's all about how they plan to destroy Boris Johnson. So it's lots of sleaze and revelations about that. None of it is a surprise, I don't think, to anyone about the cover-ups and about the fact that victims were sort of pushed aside or given private treatment in hospitals and things like that, allegedly. Whereas the rapists were actually allowed to either continue in office or carry on.
Do you think, Claire, in retrospect, they might have wished they'd just given her a peerage, sat her in the corner and kept her quiet?
No, I don't, and I really don't. And I don't think she would have wanted that either, to be honest with you. Say what you want about Nadine Dorris.
She wanted her peerage.
But the timing of this book, the name of the book, the plot, gunfire, powder and plot, as you quite rightly said. The Conservative Party were always the party of sleaze. And the Labour Party were always the one of fiscal mismanagement. Yes. And it's just playing out, isn't it? It's history repeating itself.
I think what I found interesting...
But everyone is trying to work out who everyone is.
Well, yeah, what I found interesting, just from reading a couple of the headlines, is that what she's saying is that as soon as Boris had gotten in with such a large majority, there was a cabal within the Tory party who said, right, he's done his job, we don't want him anymore because we know what sort of character he is. Now we need to get rid of him, but keep the majority. And I think that probably sounds as though that's probably true.
It's probably credible, but it's also 100% Nadine Dorris as well.
Yeah.
I mean, she was always going to say that. It's absolutely no surprise.
So do you think it's worth reading?
No, absolutely not. And
as
a writer, she's an appalling writer, I have to say that. I mean, as a writer, technically, she's a very, very bad writer.
Apart from that, you'll be getting...
In my opinion.
Apart from that, you'll be giving out to your friends and loved ones for a Christmas box. Claire,
Signed copies? Signed copies, anyone? You know what? I want to find out who these characters are. I think it'd be really interesting to know. I won't be buying it. I won't be reading it. Only because I don't read that standard of trash.
So your main
it's more
name,
like Julie
Jake Berry,
Copper.
Dougie Smith, and then Mr X. There you go. They kind of summary.
All right, shall we move on to another? So Emma, should we stick with this one? So we had another kissing scandal. So we had Rubiales, of course, the Spanish football manager, booted out of the game for years, and this time a Croatian minister has been up to no good. Is this a clip of video we have to watch? Do we have a clip?
Should have a clip, yes.
Should we reenact
let's chat away about it. We may
we'll
have
find
that.
it, yes.
We reenact the kiss.
So what happened? Another silly man being handsy.
Oh, no. Well, being handsy, really. I mean, do you kiss people or do you not? I think that for all of us, male or female...
Let's see it.
OK.
Well, it was very short, wasn't it? I don't know whether we can see it again. Maybe in slow motion.
We got it in slow-mo.
Yeah.
So he made a lunge. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, this is an official photograph. He makes a front row lunge. He's going for the lips. And she turns...
he's not going for the lips.
He is.
Oh, he was.
She turns away.
He's definitely going for the lips.
He's going for the kiss.
And she has really turned her cheek.
What does he say about it? What was his defence, Emma?
Oh, he said it was a warm, human approach to a colleague. It was maybe an awkward moment, and he apologised to whoever took it that way. I honestly don't... I mean, I'm struggling to get worked up about this with everything else that's going on in the world.
Yes, I agree.
I think that kissing is one of those things for those of us who aren't Me Too and woke. I think that kissing a colleague or kissing people on the cheek and kissing someone and saying hi... A woman... I had a meeting yesterday with a woman who gave me a kiss on the cheek, which I wouldn't have done, but I wasn't offended by. She just... That was her way. Nowadays, we tend to not. I'm sorry, one foreign minister, another foreign minister, they've worked together for years, probably know each other. It was awkward. It looked
probably
awkward. But I don't think it was an abusive attack or anything.
No, but it's probably safest just to not do that sort of stuff anymore, because it's always
in such a public forum as well.
I know.
Everyone's standing there. It just seems
people
so
taking pictures.
out of context.
Very silly. Now, we've got 1 minute, and we should be celebrating things for Woolly the lonely sheep. Claire, tell us how, in the end, Woolly was rescued.
Do you know, this is absolutely wonderful. This is a story that's been going on all this week, and the Daily Star have been behind Woolly. They're front front headline is Lamb Shank Redemption, which I think is wonderful. So this sheep, in fact, one of the... It must be in the front of the Sunday Times, Matt's cartoon. Did they not realise I just wanted to stay there? So they've rescued this wonderful sheep who has been away for years. At
least 2 years.
Dubbed Woolly, at least 2 years. So there was 5 lads that stepped up to, get Woolly back to civilisation. She's looking quite forlorn here, shaggy coat. She's had a full inspection. She's up to the mast. She's wonderful. And it said that one of the other headlines from this week, all by myself, which I thought was really good. So all the puns are right, everything's right, and let's celebrate. Woolly is home.
That's a wonderful way to end this hour. You're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a bit of a misty, murky start for some of us. Fog will be slow to clear in places, but it will eventually lift thanks to this westerly airflow that's going to start streaming its way in as low pressure drifts off to the east. This westerly airflow as well, though, pushing in showers for western districts, could be quite heavy at times with rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail as well. A few showers lingering across the eastern coast as well this morning, but into the afternoon it is going to be the east that stays driest with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Quite breezy around coastal areas of England and Wales, but temperatures further inland around 10-14 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in the sunnier spots. For any firework shows this evening, generally quite clear conditions further towards the east, but still catering for those showers in the west on and off throughout the night. A few though just pushing across the Channel Islands into southeast England as we head later on in the night as well. Underneath the starry skies though, temperatures will be dropping off quite a lot. Chilly for most of us, but particularly so for parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, where a touch of frost is possible. And again, there will be some fog lingering throughout Monday morning. But generally on the whole, it is another east-west split on Monday. Showers continuing to push in from the west, heavy at times. Eastern air is largely dry, but we could see some eventually pushing their way into East Midlands, parts of southeast England as well. Temperatures once again 10-14 degrees Celsius, but a touch fresher where you're caught in the relatively breezy conditions. Showery once again on Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives for Wednesday. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much indeed. Well, do stay with us because there's plenty more to come, including, of course, all the latest news on Israel-Hamas war. You're watching Breakfast and listening, I think, as well, to Breakfast on GB News.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of November. Arab countries are demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as the US Secretary of State continues his diplomatic tour of the Middle East. And ground forces engage in heavy fighting. It's a month on now, and there is seemingly no end in sight to the unfolding humanitarian catastrophe. Mark White is live for us in Tel Aviv with the latest.
Well, some breaking news with the Israeli military just announcing that they are going to hold another localized humanitarian pause to allow more civilians to flee the north of Gaza down to the south.
And we're exactly 1 year out from the US presidential elections. Who are the runners and the riders, and what are their chances? We'll have all the latest analysis. And will President Biden be able to even run a winning re-election campaign?
Able to communicate it in a way that is, let me say another way, with the nature, not a solid meeting with the
And back in the UK, the row over pro-Palestine protests continue, with the Home Secretary now saying that she won't hesitate to act if police need stronger powers to deal with what she calls utterly odious behaviour at demonstrations. We'll be looking at that in more detail a bit later on.
And the Prince of Wales is to arrive in Singapore today for his third annual Earthshot Prize Awards. We'll have a special report looking ahead to what he might get up to on his visit.
And remember, it's the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot, etc. So it's Guy Fawkes night, where, of course, we remember the plot against the King and Parliament. But will you be celebrating in any way at all? Will you be able to light your bonfire? Do let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
And, of course, Jonathan Vaughtry has your weather.
An east-west split in our weather developing today and for bonfire night celebrations tonight. Join me later to find out what that means for you.
And Aidan's here with all your latest sport.
Yes, indeed. Manchester United eased some of the pressure on beleaguered boss Erik ten Hag with a narrow win late on at Fulham. And in the cricket, England are put out by old foes Australia as they exit the World Cup.
And it's very good to be with you today. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Do you know that clip we were showing earlier? And if you're listening on the radio, I think you heard the silences where President Biden appeared to be having real trouble, coming across, didn't he? Well, a lot of people have been getting in touch with their view on that. Ed from Virginia says Joe Biden, not surprisingly, has been a disaster as US president. He's destroyed the US economy, endangered not only our security, but the entire world's security through his weakness and incompetence.
Yeah, and Paul adds this morning, when Donald Trump said Joe Biden was wearing an earpiece with his staff telling him what to say, people laughed. Well, they're not laughing now, are they? It looks like he was telling the truth all along, doesn't it?
I must say it was very uncomfortable witnessing some of Joe Biden's problem moments. And we don't know why, but he does appear... I know, he just doesn't fill you full of confidence at the moment, does he?
Begs the question, is this man, capable of running the most powerful nation on earth? Well, I guess that'll be up to the US voters to decide a year today.
Absolutely. Do let us know about your bonfire plans, whether you're going to be able to do it. Alison says, good morning. Well, we've had fireworks going off for over a week. One night it was still going on until 1 o'clock in the morning. We have a dog that's so terrified, and we think they should be banned. They seem to be louder every year.
And on a fun note, we were talking about how we rest after a shift when you keep unusual hours, and we both agreed we liked a little tipple to help us have a nap. And here comes Ron on shift workers saying, easy, blackout curtains and a couple of stiff drinks.
Exactly. I've got blackout curtains and maybe 1 or 2 stiff drinks, absolutely. Actually, funnily enough, when we were talking about Nadine Dorris's book, and our paper reviewers today were saying, our headline makers were saying Nadine's book was, not worth reading, frankly. Well, Peter wishes to differ. He says Nadine's book is very well worth reading. Broaden your horizons.
Yeah, and Sue adds this, I think it's worth reading because I think it's what many people think happened.
Yes, yes, it does sort of confirm your worst thoughts, doesn't it? Anyway, look, it's 5 minutes past 7. A very good morning to you, but let's kick off now with the obvious major news story, and that's in Gaza. 88 British nationals have been prevented from crossing the border into Egypt. We thought it was going to happen yesterday, but didn't. Officials temporarily closed the Rafah crossing into Egypt after accusations were swirling about Hamas infiltration amongst the injured.
The Foreign Office has been pressing for its reopening and expects a resumption within days.
Arab nations have demanded a ceasefire from the US Secretary of State as he heard their concerns in Jordan yesterday. And that's an idea repeatedly rejected at the moment by the US and Israel.
And this comes as explosions rock the Lebanese border following Israeli airstrikes. The Lebanese terror group Hezbollah has threatened full-scale war if Israel escalates its violence.
Well, our security editor Mark White is in Tel Aviv with the very latest. Mark, this fascinating, completely repeated calls by various people for ceasefires. Israel, I would imagine, would point out that there was a ceasefire and it was Hamas that broke it a month ago.
Yes, and they also say, Anne, that if they were to hold another ceasefire, then all that would do would be to embolden Hamas, who would regroup and then continue to attack Israeli civilian populations. In fact, they've been doing that anyway throughout this aerial war and now the ground war into Gaza proper. There's some breaking news to bring you, though, within the last few minutes. It's been confirmed by the Israeli military that they will have another, what they describe as a localized humanitarian pause. They had one yesterday along the Salah al-Din highway. That's the main highway from northern Gaza into southern Gaza, and that is to allow civilians to try to get over. Now, this time it was 3 hours yesterday. This time it's going to be 4 hours. Still a short window, but if people have a vehicle, they should be able to get down through that highway. The difficulty is that yesterday when they did this, the IDF said that they came under fire, mortar fire and small arms fire from Hamas terrorists who tried to attack the Israeli positions, because of course the Israeli military is now on the ground along that highway and encircling Gaza City. But we'll see if this humanitarian pause holds and how many people get south. It starts in less than an hour now, about 10 local time here. That's what, 8 UK time.
Yes, and can you just explain, Mark, we were expecting, amongst the people we were expecting to be able to cross into Egypt yesterday, we were expecting some British nationals to be amongst them, but nothing happened. Why was that?
Yeah, this is even further south, right at the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt. We know that there has been a controlled release of foreign nationals and the badly injured over recent days. Well, yesterday there was some concerns raised about the possibility that some of those crossing the border, particularly the injured in the back of those ambulances, were not civilians but were in fact Hamas terrorists. So that meant that the border crossing did not open yesterday. So there was 112 on the UK list yesterday, including, we're told, 88 British nationals, but none of them got across. So I guess it's try again today. We know that there are 200 British nationals that the UK government has made contact with. What we don't know at this stage is just how many of those 200 have actually made it to safety.
OK, Mark White, thanks for that latest update from Tel Aviv. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and we'll come back to him a bit later on in the programme as well. Now, of course, the fighting might be there, but its effects are global at the moment.
Because back home in Britain, of course, protests have been continuing on the streets of London and elsewhere as people call for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the occupation.
And it's 4 weeks now, but tensions have been rising every weekend as the protests continue apace. And our political correspondent Catherine Forster went along to the demonstration in the capital yesterday.
a really very unpleasant atmosphere here now at the Cenotaph as night begins to fall. We've got people with Union Jack flags on the right-hand side who've been here all day. It had been quite good-natured, but now we've got pro-Palestinian demonstrators on the left, and they're basically goading each other. We had a Palestinian supporter walked past the guys with the Union Jacks. There was a load of abuse. He threatened to kill them. I can't repeat the exact words he used, and they're shouting abuse at him. The police really have got their hands full trying to keep control here now.
Okay, and Catherine joins us now live in the studio. Catherine, it got a bit spicy down there later on yesterday. And, of course, now all eyes are on next weekend, and particularly where you were at the Cenotaph being a focal point. Can you explain to us what happened and what you feel that is as a bellwether for what may happen next weekend?
Yes, so the main gathering was at Trafalgar Square. During the day, I would say I was there all afternoon. Very peaceful, very little trouble, lots of families, young children, people with dogs, fairly good-natured, police generally quite relaxed. And then, of course, as night begins to fall, as so often with these things start to change. Now, we'd come down to the Cenotaph, so basically you head from Trafalgar Square down Whitehall with all the government buildings to the Cenotaph. To see these people that were waving the flags, they said they were there to protect the Cenotaph. They said the flags had been removed so as not to upset people. I have to say that is not the case. The flags are taken from the Cenotaph to be cleaned before Armistice Day and will be put back shortly. Anyway, a Palestinian protester came past these chaps and basically abuse was shouted from both sides. I mean, they were both in the wrong here. And it got very heated and police had to physically restrain both sides from ending up in a fight. He threatened to kill them. They threatened similar.
The Palestinian guy threatened to kill one of the British patriots.
In a very heated moment. And they were making similarly vile comments, I have to say. What happened then was he went off. The police then made a decision to basically block the guys with the Union Jacks off so nobody could get near them. More and more pro-Palestinian protesters came down, stood on the other side of the road. There was a lot of abuse back and forth. And then, of course, they hugely outnumbered the guys with the Union Jacks. A lot of chanting, some from the river to the sea, which, of course, is so controversial.
Yes.
Although I would say that only went on very briefly. Whether the police intervened to stop that, I'm not sure. I didn't hear that earlier in the day. But clearly, this is incredibly difficult for the police and the authorities and all the concerns about what happens now. Next Saturday, specifically, because these protests have been happening in London, around the country, around the world, every Saturday. It coincides with Armistice Day. Now, the organisers say their protest will be 2 hours after the 2-minute silence at 11. They won't be anywhere near Whitehall or the Cenotaph, they say. But the problem is, with the best will in the world, no matter what the organisers think, how do you control small numbers of people who might decide that they want to go down there and make trouble? So now the organisers meeting with the Met Police tomorrow. The Met Police will make a decision in the coming days. They've got some options. If they decide that it's too much of a risk to public order, they can ask the Home Secretary to ban next Saturday's protest outright. They might take a different decision, which is a Section 14 notice, which would make it an offence to go onto the whole of Whitehall, for instance, to keep people away.
So the issue with that, I think we need to explore is, would that apply to everybody? So nobody could go there, or just the Palestinian supporters? So could veterans and pro-British patriots still go to the Cenotaph, or would it be off limits to everybody?
I think the idea is the ban would apply to these pro-Palestine rallies for next Saturday only. Because, of course, apart from what happened yesterday near the Cenotaph, the fact that they had to get the riot police in, there were fireworks fired in Trafalgar Square, we've had these sit-ins at stations, people selling poppies, surrounded, not being harassed, but surrounded. Now, I was handed a leaflet next Saturday. The leaflet said, Saturday, 11th of November, we escalate sit-ins at 3 London stations.
Yes.
Being planned. I do wonder whether Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, will intervene, because when it comes to people not being able to get from A to B, to get on the trains, that's also very problematic.
And that could include veterans coming into London
It
for
will
Remembrance
do.
Sunday.
Hundreds and hundreds of them, yeah. And I mean, what happened yesterday when it wasn't a particular day, like next weekend is going to be so sensitive. On Sunday, Remembrance Sunday, you'll have the King and other royals and and heads of state, previous prime ministers, as they always do, queuing up to lay their wreath at the cenotaph. I mean, they'll be vulnerable if the police don't take extreme action to sort of cordon off Whitehall.
I think it will. Well, let's see what happens. But I suspect if it isn't banned, they will issue a Section 14, meaning that these protesters cannot go anywhere near on the Saturday. What the position will be on the Sunday, of course, we don't know. But these protests have focused on Saturdays. What I would say is the police are taking a tougher line, definitely. I mean, we saw there was 29 arrests yesterday. That's a much bigger number than we've had in previous weeks.
Well, it's been going up every weekend, really.
Yeah, they've been looking at social media, they've been more proactive, but talking to police, they are very aware how high tensions are on all sides, and they are very wary of making things worse. Just to give you one example, just shortly before things got quite nasty down there, there was a young woman, as it turned out. She was dressed in black, she had a face mask, and she was at the Women's War Memorial just along from the cenotaph, and the police were talking to her, and then she got up, she had flowers, she had a Palestine flag, she had teddy bears, she had candles. And I said to the police, what was the problem? And they said, well, we can't have, other countries' flags put on this war memorial. They'd spoken to her very nicely, and I spoke to her, and she was incredibly upset. She was like, I'm so sorry. And she started crying because she was there to commemorate people that were dying in Gaza, teddy bears, etc., the flag. So it's very difficult. And the police were very, very sensitive with her.
But doesn't that, even in that instance, underline the fact that there is a time and a place for legitimate process and making a political point? We live in a free country, and hurrah to that. But this isn't the place. And next Saturday isn't the time.
Yeah, well, that's a former Conservative leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, has been basically saying, you can protest about this at any time, but next Saturday and next Sunday, those should be off limits. And Suella Braverman is hinting that she'd probably like these to be banned. It's not a decision for her. Ultimately, she's the one that would issue the order, but it is a decision for the police, who are independent. I mean, so let's see what they...
It's comforting in one way to know that the police were very sensitive, for instance, to this lady that you were talking about yesterday. But I'm not sure people watching at the moment want the police to be sensitive and loving and caring about this next weekend. Maybe next weekend is a time for toughness. In fact, we're going to be talking about that a bit later on with the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, about that. He's going to be on the programme a bit later. I mean, nobody's got the answer, but maybe tougher policing, I'm sure, is what he will be calling for. Maybe that's what we do need to see next weekend.
Well, and Suella Braverman has said, hasn't she, that anybody who vandalises the cenotaph should be put into a jail cell faster than their feet can touch the ground. So very tough rhetoric coming from the Home Secretary. Of course, Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Police officer, was asked about her comment of hate marches yesterday. He took a slightly different view.
And it's worth pointing out, Commander Karen Finlay, who was responsible for policing in London this week, said the vast majority of people demonstrated peacefully during an extremely busy day. But, of course, various splinter groups were responsible for behaviour which has no place in London, and we are determined to deal with this robustly. Having been there, having heard that, having listened to the politicians, are you confident that we can get through? Because I think now we want to get through next weekend, don't we? Without there, none of us want there to be an incident.
Even,
it'd be a terrible, terrible national embarrassment, a desecration of a sacred day, if anything were allowed to happen like this. Surely now the time is to ring-fence this and allow it to happen in peace.
I don't know what the police are going to decide, but I suspect if it's not banned, they will take action to make sure that no pro-Palestinian protesters get onto Whitehall. I would suspect. Easier said than done, of course. And, of course, you can ban a protest. It doesn't mean that people are not going to come, because we saw France, they tried to ban these. People came anyway. They ended up with tear gas.
Yeah,
right. We don't use that.
Tear gas on Remembrance Sunday. I just can't get... And do you know, I mean, the front page lead of the Sunday Express is about a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor living in Britain now, says that he is terrified to go out at the moment. Because he's Jewish, people know he's Jewish, they actually know he's a Holocaust survivor, but he is just so scared of the rising feeling of anti-Semitism at the moment, he is afraid to go out. Now, if he, a Holocaust survivor, is frightened at the moment, what are veterans going to feel when they are lining up to queue and march past the cenotaph? I mean, I just think words don't describe it, do they?
Yeah, it's a very, very trying time. And I know, you know, combat veterans are finding this very, very difficult. And no doubt some of those individuals yesterday were those kinds of people, and their anger is palpable. And I just think these two groups of people should be kept apart. It looks like the police agree, it looks like the politicians agree.
And unfortunately, with what's happening in Gaza, with the death toll going up and up, 9,500 according to the Hamas Health Ministry, it looks like these protests, we don't know what will happen next Saturday, but here in London, in other UK cities and all around the world are only going to continue while the death toll rises in Gaza.
And no doubt, Catherine Forster, you'll be in the thick of it next weekend, so make sure you stay safe. But anyway, thank you for bringing us all the way.
Well, you said you felt very, very uncomfortable, even at that.
I did feel uncomfortable, and it was such a shift because all day it was completely fine, and then the tone just changes, just like that.
Yeah, and it just shows how quickly it can. Well, do let us know what you feel about that. gbviews@gbnews.com, as ever. It's 21 minutes, just coming up to 22 minutes past 7. Let's have a look at some of the stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And it's dozens of flood warnings remaining in place across England after days of heavy rain. The majority of warnings are along the south coast, where the Met Office warned that heavy rain was falling on utterly saturated ground yesterday.
And passengers are paying more and more to travel on the rail system since it was privatised, with over 30 billion quid having leaked out of the system since 1993. That's according to the RMT union.
And after Number 10 confirms the Renters Reform Bill will be in the King's Speech, Labour vows to deliver more action on housing in their first 6 months than the Tories have delivered in the last 6 years. Right, well, I think it's probably time to find out exactly what the weather is going to do to you, wherever you live at the moment. Here's your weather.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a bit of a misty, murky start for some of us. Fog will be slow to clear in places, but it will eventually lift thanks to this westerly airflow that's going to start streaming its way in as low pressure drifts off to the east. This westerly airflow as well, though, pushing in showers for western districts, could be quite heavy at times with rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail as well. A few showers lingering across the eastern coast as well this morning, but into the afternoon it is going to be the east that stays driest with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Quite breezy around coastal areas of England and Wales, but temperatures further inland around 10-14 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in the sunnier spots. For any firework shows this evening, generally quite clear conditions further towards the east, but still catering for those showers in the west on and off throughout the night. A few though just pushing across the Channel Islands into southeast England as we head later on in the night as well. Underneath the starry skies though, temperatures will be dropping off quite a lot. Chilly for most of us, but particularly so for parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, where a touch of frost is possible. And again, there will be some fog lingering throughout Monday morning. But generally on the whole, it is another east-west split on Monday. Showers continuing to push in from the west, heavy at times. Eastern air is largely dry, but we could see some eventually pushing their way into East Midlands, parts of southeast England as well. Temperatures once again 10-14 degrees Celsius, but a touch fresher where you're caught in the relatively breezy conditions. Showery once again on Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives for Wednesday. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
There you are. Well, I hope the rain has somewhere to go for you wherever you are living at the moment. Do let us know. Roz says, hi, Roz. You ask if people are celebrating with fireworks today being the 5th. We had a horrendous night last night with fireworks going around us all very late into the night. We had our first bout of fireworks at Halloween. It's always an awful time for us as our dog is extremely frightened and it is so distressing. If fireworks are not to be banned, I think they should only be allowed on certain nights of the year.
Yeah, and Chris says, in reference to those wanting to ban fireworks because it scares their dog, I wonder if the military dogs look at the civilian dogs and think, what a bunch of softies these civvy dogs are. Bring back national service and toughen them up. National service for dogs, Chris is saying.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because a bit later on in the programme, we're going to be talking about the fact that it isn't just pets who are scared of fireworks, particularly combat veterans, as you've been saying, human beings who've actually been in frontline fire. They can get terrible flashbacks just listening to the fireworks going off all the time. And so it's a human matter as well. It's not just about pets.
Yeah, there's a pal of mine who was a tank commander, and he just cannot abide fireworks night because he lost friends in combat, and those explosions make him feel like he's back in that position. You know, it's a complicated thing, and often I think we just don't think about those matters, do we?
No, actually, and I was saying maybe it'll rain tonight, and that'll put a lot of people off. But Rob disagrees with me. Morning, Rob. I don't think the rain is going to put people off because they've already spent a fortune on fireworks. I live in the sticks, and last night it was pouring with rain, but there were fireworks going off everywhere.
Yeah, and Jim's saying it's the most stupid thing, setting off explosions, scaring animals and disturbing people, throwing fireworks at firemen, etc. Why can't we just have light shows instead?
Well, yes, you can. And you can have wonderful light shows, can't you, with those drone light shows, which are so brilliant. Christine says, Nadine Dorris's book. I read the opening part in the Daily Mail yesterday, and I have to say one thing to you all. It's the old adage, there's no smoke without fire.
And on that topic, the hot topic of Remembrance Day protests, Tony, straight to the point. It's about time Sunak got rid of Khan. I don't think he can, actually.
No,
he's the elected mayor. Anyway, and took control of protesters demanding the UK should call a ceasefire, which has nothing to do with us once again.
And demanding the ceasefire, I don't get why people are just blandly saying we must have a ceasefire, because that can only mean the Israelis stop firing, which means, I mean, look what Hamas did exactly a month ago.
That's right. And we had Daniel Finkelstein, Lord Finkelstein, on GB News earlier this week, and he was saying people who are calling for a ceasefire simply don't understand Israel. Israel stands alone, it protects itself, and in this instance, a ceasefire would just simply allow Hamas to regroup and rearm.
And you have to remember that it was the situation before October the 7th was ceasefire.
Yeah.
And it's Hamas that broke that ceasefire with unbelievably brutal attacks. And that's why Israel is doing what they're doing. Just blandly calling for a ceasefire doesn't sort of grab the whole problem, does it?
And I wonder if those calling for a ceasefire would be saying the same thing if their neighbourhoods were invaded, if their loved ones
in the way
were
they
murdered,
did,
decapitated, kidnapped. I don't think they would.
No.
Isn't that what you think?
OK, well, do stick with us. There's plenty to talk about, as you can see. Coming up, it's exactly 1 year to go until the US election, and we're going to be discussing the potential runners and riders next. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning. If you've just joined us, it's 7:31. You're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News with me and Martin. Now, exactly 1 year from now, can you believe, US voters are going to be heading to the polls to elect a new president.
And many are speculating that 2024 may be a rerun of the 2020 election, but with roles reversed, with incumbent President Joe Biden taking on his former rival Donald Trump. But a lot can change, of course, in a year.
Joining us now in the studio is broadcaster and former government advisor, Rochard Goalb. And it's lovely to see you again. You can't believe it's a year now. I mean, you still don't have proper candidates yet.
I think they're pretty proper. I think we've got 14 candidates. We have 4 Democratic contenders, and 9 Republicans and 2 independents. And they are laboring under the power of President Biden and former President Trump. They're a long way away. I mean, for example, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley are 48 times less likely to get the nomination than Donald Trump, according to the bookies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it seems nobody can touch Trump. We sort of have a bit of a fun, bit of a jibe about Joe Biden, but are there questions worth asking about his faculties, his capabilities, his suitability to be the candidate?
Not after 7th October, I don't think. I think he stepped up to the plate and showed himself to be capable and competent in the midst of the worst crisis any of us can remember. I think Antony Blinken, his Secretary of State, who certainly in his own right is capable and doing a good job and doesn't act without instruction or consent or discussion with old Joe. So, no, I think his estimation has gone up tremendously. And if I may, at the same time, Donald Trump's criminal indictments are looking more and more like the publicity exercise to damage him than real judicial processes that are going to show him in prison. So I think that we're at this point today, with only 1 year to go, as you say, Anne, very likely to see these two as the contenders.
And it's interesting, you've just been talking about Joe Biden's stance since the 7th of October. And of course, meanwhile, Trump is also playing that card, saying this would never have happened if I'd been president, and I am uniquely placed to be able to sort it out. Because he's implying that he'd just go over there and bang everybody's heads together and that would work. And a lot of people believe that in him, don't they?
He is an extraordinarily powerful individual. A lot of people say that Ukraine wouldn't have happened if he'd been president. And personally, I think that's probably just ever so slightly more believable than the claim about Hamas and Israel. But that's possible too. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that were Trump president right now, those two aircraft carriers and destroyers would be docked at Bushra's Bazaar in downtown Beirut.
Do you think any policies will matter? I mean, 9 million immigrants have come over the border. Trump will play big on that. The war in Israel, the Muslim vote, the young vote, net zero, energy. Or would it simply be a straight-out duke, once again, between Trump and Biden, the personality clash?
Now, I can't do a great Southern accent, but I'm going to quote Bill Clinton. It's the economy, stupid.
That's a good impression.
That's what he said years ago, and that's all there is. When you're in the voting booth, be it in the UK or the USA or anywhere else, you want to know, how much money am I going to have left in my pockets? Nigel Farage puts this very well. You know, can I send the kids to school? Can we take a holiday? That's all that counts.
OK. It's all about the economy. Thank you very much for that superb update. Thank you, Roger.
And Roger, you'll be back with us a bit later on in the programme too.
Thank you, sure.
Absolutely great. Do stay with us, because coming up, all the latest sport with Aidan McGee. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys. On GB News and GB News Radio.
Minutes to 8. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News with me and Im.
And it's time to go for all the sports news now with him. Aidan McGee joins us. Aidan, so yesterday it was the clouds over Old Trafford.
We did. We went through it in depth, didn't we?
They dug themselves out of a hole at Fulham.
They did. I mean, look, it's not as simple as that. I mean, I suppose it is as simple as that. They did dig themselves out of a hole, but they didn't have it their own way. They didn't play very well. I think there will still be scrutiny on Erik ten Hag in spite of the fact that United scored a late goal. They had a goal disallowed earlier in the match by Scott McTominay as well, but there was a good travelling support from United, as there always is. They're in buoyant mood. They held up a banner saying "Play like you mean it," and I thought that was very telling, because it was basically saying to these players, listen, you're not giving your all in the last few weeks, and we want to see more from you. That's what we demand from you as Manchester United players. And to be fair, that was a tough trip to Fulham, and they got the job done. Still, though, there is a cloud to hang over Old Trafford. They've got some big games coming up. And Erik ten Hag, you mentioned yesterday about how, he'll be this issue of player power. Well, you said he'll be earning a lot less than players. Guess how much he earns in a year? £9 million.
There you go.
So he's not too far short of what the players earn.
Crumbs alive. I just can't get over the figures.
So even if he got the old Spanish elbow,
yes,
Spanish archer, the elbow, he'd still get multi-million payoff. So my point is, where's the incentive to succeed when you get paid so much to fail?
Well, yeah, that's true, but then contracts are incentivised, and also if you do a bad job, generally speaking, as a rule of thumb in football management, if you do 2 bad jobs in a row, you don't work again. However, there are a group of managers over the last 20 years, Jose Mourinho is among them, and I mean, it's a bit unfair saying this because he's been hugely successful, but he's earned more in payoffs than he has in his actual salary. Chelsea at one time, their annual accounts revealed about 3 years ago, prior to COVID, they still had 8 managers on the book, previous managers on the books that they were still paying. Because they don't always pay them off in lump sums, and they don't always pay them off in lump sums. They give them gardening leave and pay them their normal salary until such time as they get a new job. Now, the manager then has a choice. Do I get a new job and relinquish my payment from Chelsea or whichever other club?
Or do I hang up my golden handshake?
Do I hang it out and then, hang on a minute, that could be 4 years. And if you haven't had a job for 4 years, you're probably not going to get another one.
And it's a shame that you couldn't see Anne Diamond's face there. I think you summed up the nation. Your jaw was on the desk.
Yeah, not that I was ever any good at football, but, I'm definitely in the wrong job. Yeah.
So what else we got quickly? We did a bit on VAR.
Yeah, we're going to go over that more in the next hour or so, because we covered it quite at length last time. However, Mikel Arteta, the Arsenal manager, was absolutely seething at some decisions yesterday. Look, it was their first defeat of the season. He's very emotional at the end of it. I think he'll probably regret some of the things he said. Some of the language he used as well was quite choice. He said he was sick, he was embarrassed, he was regarded as a disgrace, and so that's not really becoming a football manager. Possibly a little bit of a lack of experience there.
Okay, so we'll discuss VAR next time Aidan's on in about an hour. Yeah. Gavin's been in touch, says, please, GB News, do a poll. VAR, yes or no? So let's throw it open to you, please. gbviews@gbnews.com, you know how to do it. What do you think of VAR?
And I'm firmly in the no camp. I think it's spoilt the game. Let's have a little bit of chaos. Let's go back to basics.
You like the chaos?
Chaos? We've got enough chaos, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got lots of chaos, yeah. OK, it's 7:43. Now, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, is expected to arrive in Singapore today for his 3rd annual Earthshot Prize Awards. This is, of course, to find and fund solutions to repair our planet within a decade.
Yeah, Prince William is also expected to try dragon boating and will meet locals to see how they live sustainably. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has more.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In the 1960s, it was thought impossible to put a man on the moon within a decade. But President John F. Kennedy had that vision and managed it.
Now, rather than a moonshot for this decade, we need Earthshots. We must harness that same spirit of human ingenuity and purpose and turn it with laser-sharp focus and urgency on the most pressing challenge we have ever faced: repairing our planet.
Prince William founded the Earthshot Prize to find 50 solutions by 2030. Now in its third year, 15 finalists in 5 categories have travelled to Singapore, an island designed to be green and sustainable. One champion from each category will win £1 million to scale up their solution. British company Colorifics have found a way to make clothing dye that doesn't harm our rivers after a shocking visit to Nepal.
We just noticed that nothing was living in the rivers. Like, what's going on here? And because we were working with a water quality NGO, they said, oh, well, this is another one of those problems we have. And it's because the textile industry just dumps all their waste into the water.
Already working with British car manufacturers, Enso makes tyres for electric cars that reduce tyre pollution. But they need help to roll their solution out on a large scale.
The technology and collaboration exists here. What we simply need is, of course, the scalability of the funding to be available to really build better in Britain. And that's really what the focus of Enso is to do, is to show how we can build with optimism and hope.
This week, the Prince of Wales flies commercially to Singapore, joined by global stars including the son of the crocodile hunter, Robert Irwin, and Hollywood actors Hannah Waddingham and Cate Blanchett. The Prince is expected to deliver a message of hope and optimism instead of unappealing doom and gloom. Some of this year's Earthshot finalists have told GB News how the royal family can help persuade the global community to act.
The current King Charles has always been a big environmentalist, and I think that had probably a fairly profound influence on Prince William to start this prize. And for the global community, that's important.
I was really surprised about the level of information and depth that he had in tire pollution in particular. So he was very, very much on board with what we were doing and understood the science behind it as well.
The Earthshot Prize award ceremony takes place on Tuesday, celebrating creativity and innovation from around the world. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, good luck to Prince William. I think he's doing a fab job. 7:46. Joining us now to go through some of the day's headlines, broadcaster Claire Muldoon and writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. Thank you very much for coming back. Right, what are we starting with? Oh, Emma. Suella Braverman and her vow to get rid of street tents.
Yeah, she's been talking about how she wants to crack down on rough sleeping. She wants to end the blight of our cities across the UK, of, you know, these sort of homeless tents, sleeping bags and homeless tents. She talks about the explosion of crime and drug taking that goes on, and she uses language like squalor, nuisance and distress. So she's talking about sort of the effect of homeless people in tents, in large encampments, and how she wants to end this. She wants to introduce legislation in the forthcoming King's Speech to make putting up a tent a civil offence. And also she wants to crack down on the charities that are providing these tents. As so often with Suella Braverman, it's quite a sort of ham-fisted approach to this. I think a lot of people can see the point she is trying to make, that large groups of tents, large sort of, as I say, encampments are a blight on our cities. But they're also very mindful of the. I mean, she calls it a lifestyle choice. I think we are all aware of the horrendous choices that you take to get to that stage where you are living on the street with a tent or without a tent.
Well, I worry about that phrase, saying it's a lifestyle choice, because I can't think that anyone would prefer to live in a tent on the street than anything else.
Well, they wouldn't.
I'm not sure why she said that.
I really don't know. I think maybe she was getting at the fact of, if we look globally at the homeless drug culture of San Francisco, say, where we've had major blue-chip companies withdraw their shops from downtown San Francisco, and Whole Foods have moved out. IKEA actually are moving in. They're moving into this part of San Fran that's completely run down. Ironically as well, San Fran tech head, working from home, lots of these companies that were based in San Francisco enabled and built the working from home model. Everyone now is not working is still working from home, sorry. They're not working in the cities, and that is the cause of this destruction.
Yeah.
People are not using the economies of scale to buy local, go into the city centres and do it. So therefore, we've got this vista of openness that these drug lords, those that are dissident, people who have fallen on hard times, because it is tough out there.
But it's also worth focusing on the homeless people themselves and how they get to that stage.
The thing that makes me sort of bang my head on the desk about this kind of thing is that she's got a point. She's got a point about we don't want to descend towards these tented cities on British streets that we have seen across the continent and America.
Well, Martin.
Yet, now she's put herself in a position where crisis and shelter, the homeless charities, are steaming into her. And once again, it's the cruel, cruel Tories. Who's in charge of the
nasty party?
Do you remember when Giuliano went in, where he became mayor of New York City?
Yeah.
Completely cleaned it up.
Yes, he did.
Right, moved all the homeless people, everyone sleeping rough, moved them all away, made it all a sanctuary. I've worked in homeless shelters. I know the effects of, not having a home or, not having anything at all. It's really, to say that it's a lifestyle choice is often demeaning and it's just not right at all.
But maybe we do need a much more nuanced discussion about the choices, about the things that happen in people's lives, whether they don't want to be in hospitals.
We need more houses. We need more housing.
We need more houses. We need people, veterans, for example, to be looked after properly after they leave the service. We need better drug facilities for people, because a lot of this is about drug taking. Tents are often used for that kind of...
There are criminal
There's a lot of crime going on as well.
Mm.
So I think we can't just pretend that this is, a really simple...
But cracking down on the tents themselves and actually saying they must not do, the charities must not give starving, cold people in the street a tent is not what she should have said. She's actually attacked the problem from the wrong angle.
Well, of course she has, but that's the comms. That's the comms at the moment in Downing Street. They seem to be attacking everything wrongly.
Yeah, they're just going for the symptom and not the cause.
Yeah.
It looks cack-handed and it looks heartless, and now is not the time...
It looks very heartless and very nasty.
Yeah.
That's exactly
if she'd said instead, we need to do something about the fact that we are becoming tented cities if we're not careful, therefore we are going to look at a programme to offer better alternatives.
And she could have consulted
people back into housing.
Yeah. She could have consulted those that know, and those that know are the ones that work for shelter and work for all these homeless aids. They were not consulted.
And frankly, I don't want to hear that in the King's speech, do you?
I don't.
I don't want to hear the King reading out something about we will get rid of tents or we will...
Swallow and the distress.
Yeah. I don't want to hear him say that.
That's about us.
I don't think he'd be happy saying that at all.
And it's also now become a very political debate, and the King shouldn't be reading out political statements. That's
No,
the
he
whole
shouldn't,
point.
especially when he's got enough homes.
And can we just focus on that feeling? We've all seen it. Early cabs in the morning, we often see, and you see people on the streets in the rain, in the cold, in the winter, and every one of us thinks there, but how awful. There, but for the grace of God. The cold and the
well, it is
dirt
awful.
and the
It is
misery
awful
that people must go through.
Yeah. OK, shall we move on to one of your stories, Claire?
Yeah.
This is in... It says the China Jolly Folly.
Yeah,
Here we go. This is MPs on the take.
This is a really, really interesting story, actually, and one that I think we have to be aware of, and it's embedded in page 8 here of The Sun on Sunday. Nothing else at all has been reported from it. There's an APPG, I think that's the cross-party
action
group for China.
Yep.
There's a trip to China end of this month with John Swire, Arup, the City of London Corporation and HSBC. Every one of those corporations, every one of those businesses has a massive link to China. There are some MPs in this country who have actually been sanctioned against China by the Chinese. You've got the Uyghurs who are being... look what's happening in the Gaza Strip at the moment. Oh, and by the way, is there a war in the Ukraine? You'd never know it because it's not covered anymore.
I can't believe that either.
OK, Anne? And then the Uyghurs, the systematic abuse of the Uyghurs in communist China at the moment. Do we really think? What are the optics in this then? Conservative and Labour, because it's a cross-party group here, all going on a jolly over to China. I don't think the optics of that are very good at all.
No.
And when you look at the firms who are sponsoring it, they have got massive, massive ties to China.
OK, we haven't got time to discuss that any further. We might do next time. But right now, we've only got a couple of seconds to say thank you very much for the moment. See you next hour, and let's find out more about your weather today.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a bit of a misty, murky start for some of us. Fog will be slow to clear in places, but it will eventually lift thanks to this westerly airflow that's going to start streaming its way in as low pressure drifts off to the east. This westerly airflow as well, though, pushing in showers for western districts, could be quite heavy at times with rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail as well. A few showers lingering across the eastern coast as well this morning, but into the afternoon it is going to be the east that stays driest with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Quite breezy around coastal areas of England and Wales, but temperatures further inland around 10-14 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in the sunnier spots. For any firework shows this evening, generally quite clear conditions further towards the east, but still catering for those showers in the west on and off throughout the night. A few though just pushing across the Channel Islands into southeast England as we head later on in the night as well. Underneath the starry skies though, temperatures will be dropping off quite a lot. Chilly for most of us, but particularly so for parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, where a touch of frost is possible. And again, there will be some fog lingering throughout Monday morning. But generally on the whole, it is another east-west split on Monday. Showers continuing to push in from the west, heavy at times. Eastern areas largely dry, but we could see some eventually pushing their way into East Midlands, parts of southeast England as well. Temperatures once again 10-14 degrees Celsius, but a touch fresher where you're caught in the relatively breezy conditions. Showery once again on Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives for Wednesday. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Coming up, we'll be live from Israel to bring you all the latest news from that conflict. This is GB News.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of November. Today, well, more violence in Israel and Gaza, and Arab countries demand an immediate ceasefire as the US Secretary of State continues his diplomatic tour of the Middle East, and ground forces engage in heavy fighting. A month on, there is seemingly no end in sight to the unfolding humanitarian catastrophe. Mark White is live for us in Tel Aviv with the latest.
Well, a 4-hour evacuation pause is underway in Gaza at the moment to allow civilians to head from the north of Gaza down through the south through that main highway. So a pause in the fighting to allow this evacuation.
Meanwhile, in the UK, the row over pro-Palestine demonstrations continues, with the Home Secretary now saying that she won't hesitate to act if police need stronger powers to deal with what she calls utterly odious behaviour at protests. We'll look at this in more detail in just a few moments.
And we're exactly 1 year from the US presidential election. Who are the runners and riders? What are their chances? What are they going to offer us? We'll have all the latest analysis. And will, for instance, President Biden be able to run a winning re-election campaign?
It's going to be like a roller coaster ride with a lot of twists and turns that we can't foresee.
And as always, we want to hear your stories. We'll be speaking to a young woman who had to spend £6,000 getting an ULEZ compliant car.
And the astronaut who helped bring the damaged Apollo 13 back to Earth has died, aged 87. We'll be speaking to a new generation astronaut later on to look back at the space race of the past and what's going to happen in space in the future.
And of course, it's Guy Fawkes Night, where we remember the plot against the King and Parliament. But many people, from those with autism to veterans suffering with PTSD, are calling for the laws on private firework displays to be changed. We'll have a special report and be debating that issue later on in this hour.
Yes, and is it anyway going to be an absolute washout tonight? Jonathan Vautry will have your weather.
An east-west split in our weather developing today and for bonfire night celebrations tonight. Join me later to find out what that means for you.
Anyway, it's lovely to be with you this morning. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
And don't forget to let us know, actually, what you're going to be doing about bonfire night tonight. Maybe you're just not going to try. It's going to be very, very wet.
Well, I tell you, fireworks are so expensive now. I bought a box of fireworks last year for my kids. About 60 quid for a little selection box. 60 quid.
And what do you do with it? It goes up in smoke.
Literally.
I mean, it's so crazy. I've never really gotten fireworks. Maybe big fireworks displays are something, but tonight, really? I don't know. It's going to be wet, windy, horrible. Oh, that's bonfire night for you. When I look back on it, that's how we all spent as children. That's how you remember it, isn't it? You had to put your warmest anorak on, your welly boots, and you always felt so cold, didn't you? But maybe that's what makes bonfire night very British and very special. Right. Let us know, anyway, how you're going to be spending tonight and what you think of the fireworks, because, as we said, we're going to be debating that a bit later on. gbviews@gbnews.com.
To our top story now, to Gaza, where an evacuation route out of the north of the Strip has now been opened. For the next 4 hours, Israel will not strike any location along that route, permitting people a further opportunity to escape the violence.
88 British nationals have been prevented from crossing the border into Egypt. Officials temporarily closed the Rafah crossing after accusations were swirling around about the fact that there may be Hamas people infiltrated amongst the injured.
And the Foreign Office been pressing for its reopening and expect a resumption within days.
Arab nations, meanwhile, are demanding a ceasefire from the US Secretary of State as he heard their concerns in Jordan yesterday, an idea repeatedly rejected by the US and Israel.
And this comes as explosions rocked the Lebanese border following Israeli airstrikes. The Lebanese terror group Hezbollah has threatened full-scale war if Israel escalates its violence.
So let's cross now to Tel Aviv, where our security editor, Mark White, is standing by to give us the very latest. And yes, update us, please, Mark.
Well, yes, that humanitarian ceasefire, or pause at least, localised to allow this evacuation to take place from northern Gaza into the south is underway. It began just a few minutes ago with the IDF saying that along the Salah al-Din highway down through northern Gaza into the south, they will not conduct any operations. However, they can't guarantee that Hamas will not attack them. And indeed, they say that yesterday, when they had the 3-hour pause along the Salah al-Din highway, that Hamas did just that, firing mortars and anti-tank shells at the Israeli forces in that area. Today it's a 4-hour pause. It's not a long pause at all, of course, but if people have access to vehicles, one Israeli commander said that if you care about yourself and your loved ones, you will get out of northern Gaza now and head south, because of course we know that Israel has Gaza City surrounded, that in the coming hours and days they are going to push ahead significantly with that operation to take on Hamas in its stronghold, and that will be an altogether more costly battle than we have seen so far in terms of those injured and killed on both sides.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. We'll leave it there for the moment, because the fighting, obviously, in the Middle East, but its effects are global.
And back home, protests have been continuing on the streets of London and elsewhere as people call for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to occupation.
Yes, I mean, it's exactly a month now, isn't it? But tensions have been rising every weekend because of protests every weekend. Our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, went along to a demonstration in the capital yesterday.
A really very unpleasant atmosphere here now at the Cenotaph as night begins to fall. We've got people with Union Jack flags on the right-hand side who've been here all day. It had been quite good-natured, but now we've got pro-Palestinian demonstrators on the left, and they're basically goading each other. We had a Palestinian supporter walked past the guys with the Union Jacks. There was a load of abuse. He threatened to kill them. I can't repeat the exact words he used, and they're shouting abuse at him. The police really have got their hands full trying to keep control here now.
Catherine Forster joins us now in the studio. Good morning to you, Catherine. So you were in the thick of it there yesterday at the Cenotaph as those protests turned a bit spicy. What happened?
Yeah, so I'd been in Trafalgar Square all afternoon. It was very peaceful, people of all ages, backgrounds, dogs, children, no problem at all. But often as night begins to fall, things change. We saw it get very nasty in Trafalgar Square with fireworks, with the riot police brought in. And when I went down Whitehall, this was about 5 o'clock, just beginning to get dark. There were guys on one side of the road with Union Jack flags. There was at that point a single pro-Palestinian protester came along on that side of the road. They basically started shouting abuse at each other. The police had to intervene to stop a physical fight between them. The pro-Palestinian supporter at one point shouted that he would kill them. They shouted back similar abuse. And then after that, the police made the very smart decision to basically block that side of the road. So people leaving the demonstration at Trafalgar Square, coming down Whitehall to the Cenotaph, were kept on the other side. There was a lot of abuse back and forth, and then as the numbers of protesters gathered on that side, a lot of chanting, completely drowning out the guys with the Union Jacks, who at one point were playing Dam Busters, which was quite surreal. There was a bit of chanting of from the river to the sea, which is obviously highly controversial, not for long. I don't know whether the police had a word or whether it just died down, but some very unpleasant scenes and very, very different from earlier in the day. 29 arrests, that's up significantly from previous weeks. The police are clearly taking a tougher line. There was a sit-in at Charing Cross and in other stations. And of course, these demonstrations, not just in London, but elsewhere around the country and around the world, but real concern now on what happens on Armistice Day when there is another protest due. And will there be a decision taken to ban it? We don't know. Possibly the police might use a Section 14 order to basically keep people away from Whitehall completely. The protesters have promised not to go near there. They've promised that their gathering will be 2 hours after the 2-minute silence. However, of course, if you've got a large group of people, it becomes very hard to control. There's always going to be elements who are there to cause trouble.
And the sorts of people who are making those sort of chants, there were swastika placards at the protest as well. There was a Keep the World Tidy placard with the Israeli flag going in the bin. Front page of the papers today, as Anne pointed out, Holocaust survivors too afraid to go onto the streets of Britain. Is the word of the protesters, honestly, we won't do anything naughty next week, enough? Or did the police really have to take account of what you saw yesterday when people are up close and personal? It can turn nasty on a sixpence. We need surely robust policy in place, and really, surely the only way through this is to prevent those protesters getting into Whitehall and certainly nowhere near the cenotaph during that sacred national moment.
Well, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign is one of the sort of half-dozen groups that have banded together to organise these protests. They are meeting with the Metropolitan Police tomorrow to discuss their plans and a way forward. But if the Metropolitan Police decide that there's a sufficient threat to public order and there's unacceptable security risk, they can then take the decision to ask the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, to ban next Saturday's march. Now, we don't expect a decision for a few days. If that happens, the Home Secretary, for her part, has used very tough language, hasn't she? She's described these as hate marches. She said yesterday that anybody who vandalised the cenotaph should be put into a jail cell faster than their feet can touch the ground. So let's see. But of course, even if you ban a march, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are not going to assemble. We've seen it in France. France has tried to have no truck with these marches from the very beginning, but people gathered anyway. So it's looking like an incredibly difficult weekend, and not just the cenotaph, obviously the focus with Armistice Day and then Remembrance Sunday, but there's 3 sit-ins planned next Saturday afternoon at major London rail stations and, you know, stopping people from getting from A to B. And as you say, incredibly difficult for the Jewish community. There's been a huge rise in anti-Semitic incidents, many feeling really frightened and intimidated and deciding that they don't feel on these days that central London is a place that they can go.
It's interesting, you talked about how the mood changed quite suddenly as dusk started to happen. And it sort of got nasty because chanting started and hurling insults from one side of the street to the other. And you just wonder whether next weekend, for instance, is the time when we get a lot of military music being played by those military bands. One way maybe to stop that, the hurling of insults and the chanting, is to actually just have very, very loud band music. I'm just thinking of ways that we could try and stop things becoming inflamed.
I suspect, and obviously I no knowledge what the Metropolitan Police will finally decide to do, but I suspect that if it's not banned, they will use this Section 14 order that they've used to keep people away from the Israeli embassy to basically make the whole of Whitehall a no-go area to any protesters. It's easier said than done. And, of course, the people that will be coming to Armistice Day, the commemoration, have to get to Whitehall, don't they? They're coming from all around the country. And so even getting there could be difficult.
And when you get the veterans coming to do their marching, that's organised, but there's always people lining both sides of Whitehall, just ordinary people who just want to watch it and witness it.
Right. And
how do you stop protesters inveigling themselves just amongst the ordinary public?
It's going to be next to impossible, and more to the point. If we have a situation, say, for example, where Whitehall is capped off at either end, how will veterans get in and out? And if they're prevented from getting in and out by a mob, we will have a confrontation at a different point.
Place.
We'll simply move the issue, we'll push the issue down the road. We won't get to the root cause of it. And if something does happen on this most sacred of days, Catherine, it's going to be terrible for national morale. The optics will be awful. It'll be a global news story of cultural disharmony on the most sacred of days to British veterans.
It's obviously a huge flashpoint, potentially. And of course, the protesters feel they've been demonstrating every Saturday since the atrocities committed by Hamas on the October the 7th. They feel it's another Saturday, therefore we will be there to protest. But of course, it's not just another Saturday.
No.
It's Armistice Day. It's hugely meaningful for the country, for the world. And you do wonder, people like Sir Ian Duncan Smith, former Conservative leader, saying they've got every other day that they can protest. They need to just take a break for this Saturday only.
And you have to remember the veterans that we are celebrating on those 2 days, actually, include people who fought for peace in World War I and II, for instance. And they were Muslims, and they were Jews, and they were Hindus. And
they were Afghans.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, it's not just about British military troops, is it? Or maybe it is, but included in that fight, and the veterans we remember came from all over the world.
Palestinians fought.
Yes, they did. Yeah. All sorts of religions and races. So I just don't know why they would want to target next weekend, but clearly there could be flashpoints. Catherine, thanks very much indeed. Right. We'll move on because it's exactly 8:15. And exactly a year from now, US voters are going to be heading to polling stations to elect a new president.
Yeah, many are speculating that 2024 may be a direct rerun of the 2020 election, but with roles reversed, with incumbent President Joe Biden taking on his former rival, Donald Trump. But of course, a lot can change in a year.
Well, joining us again in the studio is broadcaster and former government advisor Rochard Gewolb, and it's lovely to see you again. Thanks very much. I was just thinking, since you were last in the studio talking about this, you said a lot of American voters are going to be thinking about their lives, their domestic issues, in other words. But I wonder how many might also be basing their vote on who might give us a more peaceful world.
Well, Bill Clinton said many years ago, it's the economy, stupid, that's all that matters to voters is what's going to happen to the money that they earn, what's going to be left in their pocket. But I think you're right. I think in this election, the world is in such a state of turmoil that there will be a factor as well, I believe, of how likely is this presidential candidate to bring us peace to the terrible situations going on, Hamas, Israel and Ukraine.
Yeah, and Donald Trump, of course, likes to make a lot of the fact that he keeps dictators like Kim Jong-un in check. Ukraine would never have happened. If he'd been in power, he'd have the Israeli situation sorted out in 5 minutes. He talks a good fight, if nothing else. How do you think, on the other side of the coin, Joe Biden has performed? There's a lot of speculation around his capability, his faculties, his suitability for the role. But do you think he's acquitted himself well since October the 7th?
Well, I think that Trump has delivered on almost everything he said. He's not a politician. He has delivered on really everything except the Mexican wall. He's put more money in Americans' pockets than any president in hundreds of years. So, you know, I kind of believe that he would have us further along towards peace than perhaps Joe or somebody else would. At the same time, Joe Biden really stood up to the plate on October the 7th, and he isn't the doddering old fool or whatever that he was being portrayed as. So I think that, as I said earlier, looking at the polls and looking at the bookies, who are, you know, usually never wrong, we're going to see these two gentlemen facing each other.
It's going to be those two. You say he's not the doddering old fool, but he does look doddery from time to time.
He does look doddery, but if you look at his actions from the 7th of October, You couldn't have asked for more.
I mean, we're just seeing pictures of him when he was on Air Force One coming back from Israel.
Yeah.
And he was speaking to reporters in the cabin of the plane, and he could barely string two words together, and it was embarrassing. Later on, though, he addressed the nation from the White House, and he did a very good speech, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's going on with him? I mean,
well, I think he's got intermittent problems, but are they of an extent that he can't serve as president? I don't know. I think that's really a medico-political issue. But for me, what's important is that when, probably the one challenge in centuries appeared, he met it with full force, and he's still standing up for what needs to happen here, which is that Hamas needs to be pushed away as a threat.
And we just watched some rare footage there of Joe Biden not falling down some stairs. I think we've got a picture of you with the Donald Trump man himself there, have we?
How well do you know him?
I have met him. That was Christmas.
Oh, my goodness, look at
that
you.
was Christmas Eve lunch last year at the Trump International Golf Club. I haven't yet had an opportunity to meet Joe Biden. I'd really like to do that, but
If you're listening on the radio, we're looking at this picture, which looks as though you're in a club somewhere.
We're in the Trump International Golf
two
Club.
regular guys just getting on with each other, maybe having a drink.
In the golf club in West Palm Beach. What I can say is that, as you can see, he's a big, tall, strapping guy like me.
You're a big lad, and he's as big as you.
Yeah, he's as big as me. He's fitter and thinner than me. That's not hard. But he looks about 15 years younger than he does on TV. There's none of that bloat. He plays golf every day. He looks very fit. Has a great sense of humor, very sarcastic.
Yeah.
I watched him talking to the waiter and talking to the president of probably the largest corporation on the planet. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
No side.
He's got charisma, hasn't he?
When he enters the room, the energy, you can feel it from the door.
And up close and personal, in terms of capability, faculties, Donald Trump, he's no spring chicken, but are you saying that he's still on his game, he's still capable?
Sharp as a 45-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, he asked me questions, he leaned over and he said, what do you think of your prime minister? I mean, he's just so sharp.
So it will come down to a two-horse race. Put your money on the table. Who's going to pip it, do you think, if it did come to that?
They are neck and neck, according to all the different polls. There is one poll which put Trump 10% ahead, but the pollsters were excoriated for that. I mean, they are neck and neck in every poll. But the bookies, he's got at least a 10% lead, and the bookies change every day.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, if that happens, history will repeat itself, and we're going to see one heck of a tantrum.
Yeah, we've got a year to debate it. 21 minutes past 8. Thanks very much to you, Roger. We'll move on now to find out what the weather is exactly doing in your area of the world.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a bit of a misty, murky start for some of us. Fog will be slow to clear in places, but it will eventually lift thanks to this westerly airflow that's going to start streaming its way in as low pressure drifts off to the east. This westerly airflow as well, though, pushing in showers for western districts, could be quite heavy at times with rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail as well. A few showers lingering across the eastern coast as well this morning, but into the afternoon it is going to be the east that stays driest with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Quite breezy around coastal areas of England and Wales, but temperatures further inland around 10-14 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in the sunnier spots. For any firework shows this evening, generally quite clear conditions further towards the east, but still catering for those showers in the west on and off throughout the night. A few though just pushing across the Channel Islands and southeast England as we head later on in the night as well. Underneath the starry skies though, temperatures will be dropping off quite a lot. Chilly for most of us, but particularly so for parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, where a touch of frost is possible. And again, there will be some fog lingering throughout Monday morning. But generally on the whole, it is another east-west split on Monday. Showers continuing to push in from the west, heavy at times. Eastern areas largely dry, but we could see some eventually pushing their way into East Midlands, parts of southeast England as well. Temperatures once again 10-14 degrees Celsius, but a touch fresher where you're caught in the relatively breezy conditions. Showery once again on Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives for Wednesday. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Well, I hope wherever you live, the weather is going to be kind to you tonight. Anyway, coming up, do stick with us because we're going to talk about ULEZ. It has its supporters and, of course, it has its critics. But should more be being done to reduce the financial impact on the public? You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
"27 minutes past 8, a very good morning to you. Now, let me mention the word. It's not Brexit. It used to be Brexit, didn't it? You get people going. Now you just say ULEZ. The ULEZ expansion has been praised and criticised, with supporters arguing it's a necessary measure to reduce air pollution. Critics, meanwhile, saying that it's about the financial burden it places on drivers, especially when the nation is battling with a cost of living crisis.
And numerous people have been forced to change their car, with many choosing to buy second-hand motors to save money. This decision, however, comes with its own set of challenges, because according to the RAC, 26% of UK motorists who have purchased a second-hand motor has developed a fault within 12 months.
Well, I suppose that's not terribly surprising. Joining us now is YouTube and social media influencer Chloe Blackwell. And a very good morning to you, Chloe. Hi. Can you explain why you took the decision to go and buy an old car in order to be compliant?
Yeah, so obviously with my YouTube, it is about cars. So after my first one, I wanted to buy a new car for the channel. So obviously, financially, I couldn't afford a new car or an electric car to fit the new ULEZ laws. But So I went and bought a second-hand car, which, yeah, that's just what was in my budget at the time.
And even though it's an older car...
But there was obviously...
Yeah, I was going to say, even though it's an older car, it is actually ULEZ compliant.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, so just setting out some of the legislation around that. So if it's a Euro 4 car, so that's petrol cars 2005 onwards or diesel 2015 onwards, they get around ULEZ. You don't have to pay the 12.5 quid per day. But of course, if you buy an older motor, you can inherit a few problems. And as I understand it, did you fall foul of that?
Yeah, I had massive problems. So obviously, my first car had a Citroen C1, which was literally completely fine. I had no issues with it. But then I wanted to get a different car, so I bought I had a black Audi A1, and within the first few months, I noticed I had a coolant leak. So I spent a load of money already trying to fix the coolant leak, and then I found. From the coolant leak, we found out it was a head gasket, and then after mechanics just looked at it, they was like, it's just a complete engine issue. So they was like, you'd need a new engine or an engine rebuild, which was going to cost thousands. It was going to cost the price of a new car, potentially, and I'd only owned it for a few months, so...
I see, that's the dilemma, isn't it? Because in attempting to save £12.50 a day, people are going, not being... too fine a point, going for some bangers. You're getting an old banger which is going to cost you a packet to put right. So really, it's a false economy. And I guess what we need to do is to make sure that other people don't fall into that same trap.
Yeah, no, definitely, because it's so easy to fall into it, because when you go down to buy a used car, you get like 15 minutes, 20 minutes to look at it, and from the outside it can look completely fine, like there's nothing wrong with it. And obviously a quick like inspection of the engine, a test drive, like sometimes it can seem like perfectly fine. And obviously you get it home, you have it for a few months, and there's just so many problems. So it is really important to like try not to, obviously it's hard. And like I always said, in like an ideal world, it'd be good to be able to take a mechanic with you every time you go.
Yes.
But it's just not possible every time.
But that's your basic lesson, isn't it? And that's the advice that you'd give to others, is that if you're going to buy an old car, it could be a very good idea in order to comply with ULEZ, but my goodness, you've got to do everything you can to make sure it's not a banger that's going to end up costing you an arm and a leg.
Yeah, literally. And that's why I say as well, it's important because obviously you can't take a mechanic with you every time. So I've been using, you get the OBD scanners, such as Carly, for example, and it is like its own little mechanic that you can take with you. Because obviously you can't, in an ideal world, you could take a mechanic with you, but you just can't. So to take, it's literally Carly's a tiny device, for example, and you can take it with you wherever you go. And obviously it just plugs in the car and it presents you with any fault codes and stuff. So it's like having a mechanic, but obviously you can't have an actual one.
And how much does that cost?
I think it's like a few hundred, but in the long run, it saves you thousands.
Yeah.
You know what? If I'd have took Carly on my first Audi A1, it would have saved me thousands, because trying to fix it, I spent thousands before. Yeah.
It's brilliant that you've done the work you've done. Anyone watching at the moment is going to want to know how to find you on YouTube. How do they?
My YouTube is Chloe Blackwell. So yeah, I do car modifications, car videos.
Brilliant.
You'd see my whole journey with the old Audi A1 on there, because I did multiple videos on it.
Well, we'll learn from your mistakes, Chloe. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. Yeah, that's what you're about, isn't it? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
I do love that sort of stuff, because people are being forced to make these decisions because they're so resentful of paying ULEZ, or they just can't afford it. And, of course, they're walking into these pitfalls. And also, if cars are older than 40 years, they're exempt. I mean, it doesn't make any sense if you think about it. You know, really old classic cars.
There's a lot that doesn't make much sense about it, but there you are. That's why it's so controversial, isn't it? Yeah. Let's move on. 33 minutes past 8 it is right now. Tonight, of course, you don't need me to tell you probably, is Bonfire Night. It's an occasion which has transformed transformed from a political event, which it once was, to a widely celebrated annual commemoration of what? Well, things that go on fire, I suppose. As years go on, firework displays are becoming much more elaborate now and are sometimes accompanied by music and lots of entertainment and food.
So, however, more recently, there has been a growing awareness of the impact of fireworks on animals and also on war veterans due to the loud noises. Some people love them, some people hate them, but should there be tougher restrictions?
Well, this last week, Scottish fire crews have found themselves in the crosshairs of attackers launching fireworks and other missiles when they're attending call-outs.
And that happened also at the Palestinian March yesterday. And we got so precarious in some areas that engines have had to back away from an incident ground to await assistance from the police.
Crews in Dundee, Edinburgh and Ayrshire have been particularly impacted, but as our Scotland reporter Tony Maguire reports, a myriad of reasons are increasing public frustration to boiling point.
Bonfire night should be a high point of seasonal festivities, but is the public's patience with fireworks starting to fizzle out? Last year, Scottish Emergency Services attended more than 1,000 call-outs, 483 fireworks offences were reported, and Police Scotland made 12 arrests, all on November 5th. Firefighters continue to be attacked from groups of youths, bombarding them with fireworks and projectiles. And aggravated attacks in Ayrshire saw a fire crew retreat to a safe distance to await a police escort. Paul Timmins, station commander in Ardrossan, explains there is a real concern among the crew when responding to certain calls.
The crew on Monday evening attended the same incident ground on 3 separate occasions to deal with bonfires and were attacked twice on that evening. These types of acts of violence are unacceptable for the crew. There is worry amongst the crew who attend certain areas within the town. But we are working in partnership with the police to ensure the safety of our crew, but also the safety of our community.
The Fire Brigades Union says the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service resources have been cut by 22% over the last 10 years, while maintenance costs have more than doubled in the last 5. For the first time, the Scottish Government has allowed councils to implement firework control zones since June, carrying up to a £5,000 fine or 6 months in prison. But interest voiced by some councils has yet to translate into a rollout of restrictions, and some members of the public don't think control zones go far enough. Rosemary Honormond is a spokesperson for the Firework Campaign, a UK Facebook group lobbying for a ban on the public sale of fireworks. She believes that fireworks should be restricted to organised displays.
Going forward, the only suitable way would be to ban the sale of fireworks to the public and then having clearer legislation for public displays by a proper organised group. They've obviously evolved and people want more drama, but I do think that attitudes are changing to fireworks.
Even if public displays are the best for everyone, several annual events, such as the one in Glasgow, were scrapped this year to divert council funding. All things together, fire crews run the gauntlet again tonight, seeing little change from last year, hoping 2024 will be the year the pieces fall into place. Tony Maguire, GB News, Glasgow.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of our viewers, Josephine, morning Josephine, has emailed in. She said, about fireworks, in Australia, they don't sell fireworks. They're classed as explosives. Firework displays are organised around the country. Anyone found with fireworks is fined $10,000 plus 6 months in jail.
Wow. Of course, there's a risk to wildfire, of course, in Australia, and fireworks can start.
Yeah, but it just shows that, I mean, it's Northern Ireland as well. Yep. In places where it is deemed to be too much, they do completely restrict the sale of fireworks. In fact, they ban them. So joining us now is spokesperson for the Firework Campaign, Nick Hodge, and Daniel Hodgson, who runs North East Fireworks. So let's start with Nick. Where do you stand on this? Should they be banned, and why?
Yes, they should definitely be banned from sales to the public. We have so much evidence, so many followers tell us their stories, and it's not just the distress it causes to animals, it's the distress it causes to dementia sufferers, people with autism, people with PTSD, and then there's the issues around the story we've just heard from Scotland, which is horrendous, but attacks on the fire service with fireworks are nationwide. and also attacks on the police. I've read this week there's been attacks on the police in Birmingham and in London, and of course yesterday the march in London as well. So there's plenty of evidence and there's plenty of support for what we want, which is a ban on sales to the public and a reduction in the number of days that you can actually set fireworks off, so that we end up with public displays only, all licensed by the local authority.
OK, Daniel, you run a fireworks company. Nick put a pretty compelling case forward there. Presumably you'd be dead against a ban on fireworks.
Yeah, absolutely. We believe that the ban of fireworks would have a detrimental effect with dire consequences, leading to statistically more injuries and those that are unregulated and unlicensed selling them out of sort of taboo back corners that they shouldn't be. People would take it into their own hands to, sort of DIY their own fireworks. I heard earlier, obviously, about the ban in Australia and Hawaii. But if you do take note and take a look onto YouTube, you will see, New Year's Eve, New Year, and every other household is still letting off fireworks. So I don't think that, the complete ban is the best way forward.
OK, well, there we've heard the argument for and against, and we'll thank you very much and end it on another viewer's view, which is Lee, Morning Lee. He says, look, it's once a year. What I do agree with is it should be completely banned at any other time of the year and should be cracked down on. But fireworks night has been the same for decades. Stop taking people's fun away. We'll be banning Christmas next because the lights are too bright. OK, well, there you have it.
Don't give them any ideas.
No, absolutely. I tell you what, we'll leave you for a second now because it's 22:09. Coming up, headline makers.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. It's 8:44. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Anne. Now let's go through the sports with Aidan McGee. We spoke earlier about VAR.
We did.
It kicked off, of course, Arsenal, Newcastle United. We said we'd do a poll on this, and it's gone mad. People are really kicking off about VAR. What are they saying?
I don't know. I haven't got them in front of me. Have you got? Oh, there we go. Nice one. Thank you. Jamie says we should be able to hear what VAR assistants are saying on the field from the referee and how decisions are made. It also needs to be more consistent with the rules of the game. So on the lines of what we were saying in the last hour. John says, I think the trouble is the cameras are too high up to get a proper angle of the game. Why can't they have cameras at head height, near corner flags and behind the goal? Then you'd have more of a clear view of a push for offside. That would certainly be the case for yesterday. Although, having said that, we did get quite an overhead view yesterday, but some of the other ones you think, yeah, that could be applied. And then Gavin finally says, we must get rid of VAR, very strong here. Newcastle game decisions were a disgrace. So that's the word used by Mikel Arteta, as were decisions in the Manchester United game. It is indeed a disgrace. I use that word again. VAR was supposed to be for clear and obvious incidents. So, yeah, that's very conclusive there. Our viewers don't appear to want it in the game anymore.
And the big point, Aidan, is that this was meant to make the game clearer, quicker, less controversy, less pressure on referees. It's done the opposite. It's a complete dinner.
At the very least, the paying spectators inside the ground need to be able to see, just like doing rugby, if we're watching it on television, if you saw during the World Cup, what the VAR officials are looking at, what the contentious issues are. Otherwise, people are just sitting there like it's a break in the theatre, an interval at the theatre, just waiting, and that's why you get people voicing their frustration.
Do you think the game would be better off without VAR?
Not necessarily. I think it needs fine-tuning. There's a reason, but we're 4 years into this now. It should be much more streamlined than it actually is.
OK, Aidan McGee, bang on. OK, let us know what you think out there. gbviews@gbnews.com. Is it time to kick VAR into touch?
Meanwhile, let's move on and tell you some of the other stories that are coming into the newsroom right now. And dozens of flood warnings remain in place across England after days of heavy rain. The majority of warnings are along the south coast, where the Met Office has warned that heavy rain was falling on saturated ground yesterday.
And passengers are paying more and more to travel on the rail system since it was privatised, with over £30 billion having leaked out of the system since 1993. That's according to the RMT union.
And after Number 10 confirms the Renters Reform Bill will be in the King's Speech, Labour vows to deliver more action on housing in their first 6 months. I suppose that's if they get into power. They say they'll deliver more than the Tories have delivered in the past 6 years. And let's meet our headline makers, broadcaster Claire Muldoon and writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. Thank you so much for coming back. Right, now...
Who's going to kick off? Who wants to go first? Emma, what about this? Working from home, blamed for the surge in pupil absence.
Yeah, this is really interesting. This is the head of the Sutton Trust, the founder of the Sutton Trust, Peter Lampall, who's been saying there's no ignoring the link between parents working from home and students, pupils persistently missing school. That when parents are at home, when you're not moving to the office, when you're just working at the kitchen table, the kids can be at home. And he says this is it's affected the kind of social contract, the obligation that parents feel to get the kids to school.
Well, very often a parent, I suppose, will drop the kids off at school and then go into work. In one, and so if you're not going into work, the temptation is to give the kids a duvet day.
And since the pandemic, there's been a huge surge in school absence. To me, it seems the opposite way around. I cannot imagine anything more stressful than having... I mean, you get nothing done. When children are at home, you get absolutely nothing done.
I'd have thought, Claire, that the opposite would happen. Because, I mean, when I used to bunk... So if you want to bunk off, you want to go back to an empty house. Not where your mum and dad's working from the kitchen table.
This also ties into the fact that not a lot of parents put a lot of emphasis on education, which is really, really sad. Truancing has gone up, and I'll tell you why. Because during the pandemic, they thought, well, if I can teach them from home, everything's all done. So therefore, the path of least resistance often, when you're parenting, is to let the child do what they want. Not in my house, I have to say. But again, it minimises the authority that staff have. Now, what we had last week, staff were striking in an academy trust in Cambridge because they didn't want draconian rules, they called them. Draconian rules, let me just tell you what those draconian rules were. Often repeated behaviour for not bringing in your tools to class, detention. It was the same stringent form of detention as if you had been a graffiti artist in the school. That is not minimising either breaking the rules. What it does, though, is is bring to the fore of authority. The staff were saying, well, that will undermine us. I would say, no, it doesn't. It actually underpins your job, enables you to actually teach, and gives you the structure and the framework in order to do it. It gives you the authority. And it's so sad.
OK, what do we do about that? Because if you're a parent, I'd like to spend a day with my child because I'm at home. Surely the parent is at fault.
Yes,
should we be slamming down on these kind of mollycoddling parents because they are damaging their children's life chances?
They are, but it's not mollycoddling parents. It's more serious than that. It tends to affect poorer pupils with poorer life chances. It tends to be those families that are not, as Claire says, you know, respecting discipline, respecting authority, respecting the fact that you get there at 5 to 9 and that you're properly dressed and you're wearing a school uniform and literally pulling your socks up. This is families who are already not the pupils are not engaged. They're not doing well. They're not engaging with the whole school structure.
But I must say that, don't you think our attitude towards schools has changed gradually
Since
anyway?
The pandemic,
when I was a kid, my mum sent me to school. Even I was half dead with a cold or flu or something. There was absolutely no excuse for not going to school.
Totally.
And when your mum is that hard on you and shoves you out the door, you've got to go to school no matter what. I don't want to hear any excuses about not feeling well. When you live a life like that, you grow up respecting the fact that education is incredibly important.
And that's why you come to the workplace. You come when you're ill or when you're not. And
you
I
turn
think
up on time. You bring your tools with you.
You bring your pen. I think a lot of people feel that...
Now, Claire, this brings us neatly on to your choice of story here. Many newly qualified teachers are quitting the UK to go abroad. A bit like junior doctors, a bit like nurses. They're getting trained here and then they're clearing off. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is the fact they don't want to teach in this country. They don't have the ability to teach. Everything in this country is written by central government, and that's against Thatcher, against conservatism, because everything was, you know, put to the local authority to deal with things. The local authorities now have the budgets, they've got the control, and they actually dish out the policy in terms of the curriculum, in what is taught and what's not. We've got the incredible SNP who have written out the GRC bill. You know, the sex education now in schools is appalling. I don't blame a young teacher, especially a young female teacher, going into schools to have to face teaching that rubbish to pupils. They've got no backing. There is too much standardisation in terms of Ofsted. The language used, good, outstanding, whatever, drivel. Absolute drivel. It's a mere tick-boxing exercise now for Ofsted. And unfortunately, it's supply and demand. And if a school is outstanding, many more pupils, many more parents would like to go there. I'm sorry, stay local. If you live somewhere local, you go to the local schools. Children now aren't even walking to school. They're being, I mean, all these plans, all these green plans to enable pupils, low-traffic neighbourhoods, cycle lanes, walk to school, it's better. They're not doing it.
No, they're not.
They've spent £2.3 billion in infrastructure alone to try and enable the greenness of the
No, it's all
land to come
talk.
through.
So
all
if-
talk and no action.
If our newly qualified teachers are looking elsewhere, are they getting paid more in
They
other
are getting
countries?
paid more.
And where are they going?
So they're going all over. They're going to mainly countries with international English schools, that whole group of schools, OK? So you've got them in Dubai, you have them in Shanghai, you have them all over the world, mostly in non-European countries. And they're teaching a curriculum.
Well, you
They're
can't
teaching
blame them,
kids
can you?
They want to go because
and
they're being paid.
seen as very prestigious English teachers from the UK, trained properly in the.
And isn't there a dichotomy that the British universities are being used as finishing schools for wealthy overseas students?
Yes.
And yet our best teachers are also going abroad to teach those kids before they even come back to this country.
I don't think it's a dichotomy at all. It's kind of broken Britain, isn't it? I mean, it's not a finishing school. These Chinese students, all sorts of international
Yeah,
students.
but they're paying way over the odds, and they're
because the
forcing
universities
British
are
students
desperate for
out.
their cash.
They're not desperate for cash. They created a business, and therefore
It's a complete business model.
it's a business model which encourages overseas students. We digress.
Okay, I want to move on, Emma.
What do you want to move on to?
Well, I want to move on to in the Mail, this idea that Rishi Sunak's got about stopping airlines with adding everything on. So, I mean, you think you've booked a ticket, but actually, you'll have to almost pay extra just to be able to sit down.
If not more.
Not almost, yeah. OK, so this is another part of the King's Speech, which, from what we've discussed this morning, the King's Speech is going to be quite a weird mishmash.
Yeah.
Anyway, airline drip
Tents
pricing.
and suitcases.
Can you imagine King Charles talking about drip pricing in airlines? But anyway, we'll see what he does on Tuesday.
Yeah.
This is the Prime Minister's plans to crack down, as you say, on drip pricing in airlines.
What do you
this
put
is
drip
where
pricing?
Drip pricing.
I hadn't
drip
heard
pricing.
that
It's all the
Okay, so
add-ons.
you see this fantastic deal to Ireland for $29.99. You think, great. Then what? You want luggage for that?
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
another 50 quid. You want to pick your seat? That's another 50 quid. Do you want to print your boarding pass? That's another 50 quid. So basically, the price that is advertised, so much is added on, and I don't even get the difference between your ticket price and then 10 times that for your taxes. All of that. So there's a lot that goes into your final price, and you almost never get the fabulous deal that you thought. What, you want to leave at 7 in the morning rather than 2 in the morning? What, and then should you stay at the airport the night before?
And you
So-
try on your app to get your boarding pass or something, and it won't work.
It won't work.
It simply won't work. So then you think, well, I'll print it at the airport, but then,
And the minute
they
your
charge you
kid
for that.
turns 2 and one day you're suddenly paying almost full fare for them, which is outrageous as well. But then they're not going to ban this drip pricing. They're just going to make it that the airlines have to be a lot more transparent, which I think we would all applaud.
And there's no wonder everyone goes straight to the pub when they get to an airport, is there? With all this sort of stress.
You want about the pub again?
I am afraid.
I just can't see. I can't see King Charles reading some of this out.
I know, that's
My
what's
government
so odd.
will
We will stop
abolish
people sleeping in tents and we will crack down on airline drip pricing.
I don't get it. Yeah. Right, well, actually, we've probably run out of time,
weird
haven't we?
speech.
We were going to talk about whether people actually, when it comes to rubbish day, you put some of your rubbish in your neighbour's bin.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
No, you shouldn't say that on telly.
Yeah,
Oh,
I do.
no.
I just found
Well, we
out-
haven't got time to debate it, but it's such a good subject. It's one for the future,
I
I
just
think.
found out the chap in our block of flats actually puts his alcoholic recycling in my bin.
That's the shame, the secret
That's your
shame.
excuse and you're sticking to it. OK, Emma and Claire, thank you so much indeed. Right, we're running out of time. In fact, we've run out of time. But we'll be back with you very soon. And can I just say that if you're interested in anything Reform UK have to say about the present situation, we've got Richard Tice, the leader, coming in.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this? Well, if you...
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Sunday, the 5th of November. And these are the stories that we've been covering on breakfast this morning. Arab countries are demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as the US Secretary of State continues his diplomatic tour of the Middle East and ground forces engage in heavy fighting. Mark White is live for us in Tel Aviv with the latest.
Well, the former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has now arrived in Israel along with the former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. They'll meet some of the IDF forces further south who are fighting Hamas.
And the row over pro-Palestine demonstrations continues, with the Home Secretary Suella Braverman now saying that she won't hesitate to act if police need stronger powers to deal with what she calls utterly odious behaviour at protests.
And we're exactly 1 year from the US presidential election. Who are the runners and riders and what are their chances?
Going to be like a roller coaster ride with a lot of twists and turns that we can't foresee.
There we spoke to a young woman who was trying to get round ULEZ restrictions and had a lesson to teach all of us about not buying a banger, really.
That's why she spent £6,000 on a car to save £12.5 a day, and turned out to be a bit of a banger.
And coming up, another of your stories, we'll be joined by the Aston Martin artist in residence, a guy called Robbie Walters, who will tell us about his latest exhibition.
And it's Guy Fawkes night, of course, but many people, from those with autism to veterans suffering with PTSD, are calling for laws on private fireworks to be changed. You catch our special report on that throughout the day on GB News.
And the astronaut who helped bring the damaged Apollo 13 spacecraft safely back to Earth has sadly died now, age 87. We'll be speaking to a new generation astronaut looking back at the space race of the past and what's going to happen in space in the future.
And the Prince of Wales is to arrive in Singapore today for his third annual Earthshot Prize Awards. Catch our special reports looking ahead to what he might get up to on his visit, and that's on GB News today.
And of course, Jonathan Vaughtry's got your weather forecast.
An east-west split in our weather developing today and for bonfire night celebrations tonight. Join me later to find out what that means for you.
Well, it's great to be with you this Sunday morning. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News. So to Gaza now, where an evacuation route out of the north of the Strip has just been opened. For the next 3 hours, Israel will not strike any location along that route, permitting people a further opportunity to escape the violence.
And 88 British nationals have been prevented from crossing the border into Egypt. Officials temporarily closed the Rafah crossing after accusations were swirling around about Hamas infiltration amongst the injured.
The Foreign Office has been pressing for its reopening and expects a resumption within days.
And Arab nations have demanded a ceasefire from the US Secretary of State as he heard their concerns in Jordan yesterday. Of course, that has been repeatedly rejected by both the US and Israel.
And this comes as explosions rock the Lebanese border following Israeli airstrikes. The Lebanese terror group Hezbollah has threatened full-scale war if Israel escalates its violence.
Well, our security editor, Mark White, is in Tel Aviv for us. And Mark, what's this about Boris Johnson arriving there today?
Yeah, he's here. Boris Johnson is meeting with the Israeli President Isaac Herzog, and then he is going to travel south to see some of those communities in southern Israel and also meet with some of the IDF troops who are engaged in the battle against Hamas terrorists. Now, accompanying Boris Johnson is the former Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. So both men seeing for themselves those affected communities in the south. And this is absolutely being welcomed by Israel, of course, for whatever the controversies surrounding Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. He was widely seen as leading the way in terms of the support of the international community for Ukraine in fighting Russia's attempted invasion of that country. So an important intervention, I think, from Boris Johnson here to show his support for Israel as it continues to fight Hamas. And in those battles, they are continuing to rage. We have got confirmation now that 28 Israeli military personnel have been killed in the fighting in Gaza, including a senior commander of the 53rd Battalion, as he was involved in a very significant firefight with Hamas terrorists. What we've been told by the IDF is that they are popping up constantly from this very sophisticated underground tunnel network with exits and entrances all over the Gazan landscape, and they're popping up and ambushing the Israeli military with anti-tank missiles and other sort of weaponry. And we know that there have been a few hundred Israeli wounded as well. So really some fierce fighting that's going on in Gaza. Where there is a pause, for the moment at least, is the Salah al-Din highway, that main route from northern Gaza down into the south of Gaza. The Israeli military has agreed to a 4-hour pause, a window for evacuations, they say. Senior commander has said to the people of Gaza still in the north, if you care for yourself and your families, then you will head south. They have repeatedly, of course, over weeks urged people to move out of northern Gaza and to head south, but hundreds of thousands of people still remain in the north as the Israeli military encircle Gaza City, and in the coming days will push into Gaza City properly, which will be the most significant battle of all. Elsewhere, well, Hamas still has the capabilities to fire rockets into communities in Israel. Last night, again, here in Tel Aviv, we came under a significant rocket barrage. We were able to film from our location as the Iron Dome missiles fired into action and took out those rockets coming over. We counted at least 14 Iron Dome missiles from the vantage point we had fired into the sky to take out these rockets heading for Tel Aviv.
Thank you very much for bringing us up to date on that situation there in Tel Aviv. Of course, the fighting might be in the Middle East, but its effects are proving to be global. Back home, protests have been continuing on the streets of London and elsewhere as people are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to occupation. Tensions have been rising every weekend, really, and actually there have been more arrests as well. Our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, went along to one demonstration in the capital yesterday.
A really very unpleasant atmosphere here now at the Cenotaph as night begins to fall. We've got people with Union Jack flags on the right-hand side who've been here all day. It had been quite good-natured, but now we've got pro-Palestinian demonstrators on the left, and they're basically goading each other. We had a Palestinian supporter walked past the guys with the Union Jacks. There was a load of abuse. He threatened to kill them. I can't repeat the exact words he used, and they're shouting abuse at him. The police really have got their hands full trying to keep control here now.
I think everybody's worried about how this situation is going to be policed. Let's turn now to the leader of Reform UK, who's joined me in the studio, Richard Tice. I worry about next weekend, don't you?
I do, and I've been worried for weeks and weeks, and indeed it's myself and Reform UK, we were the first people to call for all of these marches to be banned. It was basic common sense that it would incite hatred and violence, and that's exactly, sadly, what has played out. And the scenes yesterday in the centre of London were utterly horrific. And the Jewish community feels deeply, deeply fearful to leave their homes, to send their children to school. This is an appalling state of affairs.
But you and I are both wearing poppies. These poppies commemorate the people who gave their lives fighting in world wars, and all sorts of people from all races and nationalities. But it was about freedom of speech and freedom of expression. How can you deny the pro-Palestinians their freedom of expression, even on
the
Remembrance
right to
Sunday?
freedom of speech comes with responsibilities as well, Anne. And that responsibility is not to incite hatred or violence, and that's exactly what's happened. Some of the chants, the abuse, the threats, even on children just walking into McDonald's here in central London, this was completely predictable. One gentleman yesterday carrying a placard stating the UK law, which is that Hamas is a terrorist organisation. He was abused, his placard was trashed upon. These people are breaching the 2000 Terrorism Act. Here's the thing, though. You've absolutely said it. Next weekend, Armistice Day, the Remembrance Day weekend, is part of our national culture, our heritage and our history. And people who, frankly, don't respect that, don't understand that, you know, foreign nationals who want to protest next weekend, I believe that if they carry out that protest, their visas should be revoked permanently. They have no understanding of British culture and British heritage.
What about the argument that 99% of them are protesting peacefully?
Which they're not. I'm sorry. Anybody who's seen
there
these...
are always bad apples in amongst a protest, aren't there?
But
so you can't stop everybody demonstrating because of those bad apples.
But this has always been clear that it would incite hatred. You've only got to listen to the chants from hundreds and hundreds...
chanting.
Hundreds of people in these videos on the streets, in the railway stations, are chanting vile things from the river to the sea, chanting about, death to the Jews. There's some horrific stuff going on. The police know it. Hey, what's going on here is buck passing between the politicians, the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, passing the buck to the Met chief. You know, he's passing the buck back. This is unacceptable. We need proper leadership. In the absence of leadership, you get a vacuum. And what we're seeing is chaos is filling that vacuum. These marches next weekend should be banned, and any foreign nationals who in breach of that ban, they should have their visas revoked. We have to show proper, strong, robust leadership.
Why aren't we getting that now?
A very good question.
If, as you say, these protests should be banned, they need to know now that they're going to be banned next week.
Of course they do. Now, we've just heard the Met Review is carrying out the Met Police is carrying out a review. They should make a decision tomorrow. Say they're going to be banned. The Home Secretary approved the order, which she's entitled to do under the 1986 Public Order Act, and then everybody knows. And anybody in breach of that ban, they should be sanctioned, they should be fined.
But that means you're going to have riot police at each end of Whitehall.
It's called leadership. And that's what the
but that's
vast
riot
majority...
police on the streets of
If
London.
people are going to breach that ban, and if they are going to show total disrespect for the British culture, our heritage and our history, then frankly, they deserve what is coming to them, and foreign nationals who breach that, they should have their visas revoked. We've got to show some proper leadership and get some respect back into this country. What's going on at the moment is disgraceful, and it's because of gutless, feeble lack of leadership by our Prime Minister, our Home Secretary and the boss of the Met Police.
Reform UK did very well in the recent by-elections.
Thank you.
And wasn't it you who pledged that you will try and stand in every important
We'll be standing in every single seat in the whole of England, Scotland and Wales.
What sort of reaction are you getting from people?
We're getting a very strong...
To the very strong message you're giving out now.
Very strong... I'm getting all sorts of contacts from people in the Jewish community I've never met, never heard of, just saying, thank you, Richard, for having the courage to stand up and tell it as it is. I don't think it's courage, I just think it's the right thing to do.
30 seconds. Can you explain to those people watching right now who are pro-Palestinian marchers, who say that what you're doing by stopping them is actually effectively, against them, and how do you convince them that it's the right thing to do next weekend?
I'll tell you why, because...
30 seconds, please.
Because the Gaza Strip is governed and run and managed by Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation. It has been for 18 years. Most people on these marches have no idea just how brutal and violent and horrific Hamas are. They're actually as brutal and violent with their own Palestinian population, women and children. They're using them as human shields for their vile purposes. And the charter of Hamas is to destroy Israel and to kill all Jews. And people on these marches, they need to understand they are supporting and expressing support for a terrorist organisation that behaves in this way. It's appalling. People need to wake up, they need to sharpen up and get real with what's going on.
I wish we had more time, but we don't. Richard Tice, thank you very much indeed. There you are. Let us know how you feel about it to gbviews@gbnews.com. Yes, that's right. We'll take a quick break.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. Now to some rather sad news. We mentioned it very briefly yesterday. It's the death of one of the best-known astronauts of all time. There he is. That's Ken Mattingly. And he was going to be part of the Apollo 13 mission, which, of course, was the one that was so crippled in space. But because he couldn't go up, and we'll find out why in a minute, he was also probably the main brain behind how they managed to bring Apollo 13 back to Earth safely. The story and a tribute now from space adventurer Per Wimmer, who's a friend of the programme. It's lovely to see you again. He was 87, so he had a good innings, but he is such an amazing person, or he was, wasn't he?
Absolutely. He was one of the most decorated Apollo NASA astronauts, and he was loved by all his teammates, all 32 Apollo astronauts. He had an incredible career as an engineer. He was close to getting on Apollo 13.
Very close, but what happened?
Well, they feared he had the measles because he'd been training with Charlie Duke just days before, and Charlie got the measles, and they feared that it's probably not safe to put him up there in case of. He never got the measles, so he could have gone.
And he must have been shattered not to go on that mission.
He was honestly devastated afterwards. It really affected him psychologically.
So what happened with him when 13 got into trouble?
He was actually instrumental on the ground, guiding the NASA astronauts and the Apollo astronauts up there how to save energy. Because remember, the oxygen tank exploded. They had to move up into the lunar module, and they tried to sort of save energy as much as possible. And it was a little bit of simple engineering, but all of that was done on the ground. And he helped sort of communicate up to them what to do and how to save energy, and therefore they made it safely back to Earth.
And so they all bundled into a very small part of the craft, which then orbited Earth before it swung safely back.
Yeah, there they are landing there. People just didn't... I mean, that was one of those moments. You didn't know whether they were dead or alive. You didn't know whether the parachutes would open. But they did.
They did, yeah, exactly. They managed to. And Ken actually, on the way back... during his mission, he actually did an EVA. But here in this one, he's on the ground. He's been guiding them, putting them into the lunar module. It's very cramped. It's only made for 2 people. They were 3 in there, and then it just made into the main module afterwards as they went into the atmosphere.
And there's a great quote I'd like to read out. When he looked back on his experience, he said this: "One of the many lessons out of all of this is starting on day 1. It was from the very first moment. Assume you're going to succeed, and don't do anything that gets in the way of that. Think like a winner."
Isn't that a beautiful quote?
Yeah,
I mean, that's just an amazing quote, and that's what it takes. And a lot of these Apollo astronauts, they had that drive. They really took big risks on. They thought the glass is always half full, never half empty.
And those of us who are old enough to remember every second of it, it just shows how long ago it was, because he's 87 and most of the Apollo astronauts now in their late 80s already. But R.I.P. Ken Mattingly. It's time for one of your stories now. Robbie Walters is an artist who makes art of our discarded rubbish.
Yeah, he overcame a difficult childhood to get where he is now, and he even has his own exhibition at the Qantas Gallery, open until the 13th of November.
And he joins us now, and you've brought in one of your... Can I hold it up so that we can get... No, you tell... Oh, it's quite heavy.
Yeah.
Tell us what we're looking at.
So what you're looking at here is I collect greeting cards, mostly birthdays and Christmas cards from people. I spray them, I cut them into petals, and I arrange it like a 1,000-petal lotus. This is a small one. I normally do much larger.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I don't know how long it took you to do that, but it's absolutely fun. And you can tell that you've made it from cards because some of them have got that lovely glittery edge.
Yes.
And you are an artist in residence. Now, what does that mean, and for whom?
So I was the former artist in residence for Aston Martin, and that was an incredible position to be in because they asked me what would I like to do, and I said, can I come to your factory and see what you throw away?
Oh, good excuse.
Yeah. And then so I gravitated towards the leather department, and then I took the waste or the unused leather from the car, and then I did exactly the same thing, but made it in the wings of the logo.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I was using their waste as well.
And it's got to be said, you've got a few well-heeled, famous clients who've taken rather a shine to your work. Michael Bublé, Sir Paul McCartney. And what a week he's had. He's a fan of your stuff.
What sort of work have you done for them?
So
Again,
I was
great big
working.
pieces?
Yeah, so I was working with a children's charity, and it was auctioned in America. So we got Paul to sign one of the records, Abbey Road, and then I made it into an artwork, and then it was auctioned off for charity.
Oh, and what do we see?
So these are just a few people.
That's a big version of the one you brought into the studio.
Yeah. So these are some friends that have some come into the studio. But it's just been an incredible journey, especially working with the Qantas Gallery. It's just off Fashion Street, and I've got my largest example of my work there at the moment. It's a free exhibition. People, definitely go
and
check it out.
It's brilliant, really, what you're doing, because you're giving out a message that we do throw so much stuff away.
Yeah, so much.
And it could be good, put to good use, and actually rather beautiful use.
Yeah, I think I didn't say it before when we was talking about space, but the attitude and mindset that you have to take going out into space, you have to reuse things. You have to think about what you're using and how you use it, and that's precisely what I'm doing here. I think we have to be careful about consumption in the way that we use materials.
Look, you are the most fabulous lineup of guests to end the programme with, but sadly we really have run out of time.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you very, very much indeed. Do stay with GB News, though, because in just a few moments, it's the Camilla Tominey Show. And she's got some fabulous guests, too, including the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, and the author, Jordan Peterson, no less.
Hello there, good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a bit of a misty, murky start for some of us. Fog will be slow to clear in places, but it will eventually lift thanks to this westerly airflow that's going to start streaming its way in as low pressure drifts off to the east. This westerly airflow as well, though, pushing in showers for western districts, could be quite heavy at times with rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail as well. A few showers lingering across the eastern coast as well this morning, but into the afternoon it is going to be the east that stays driest with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Quite breezy around coastal areas of England and Wales, but temperatures further inland around 10-14 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in the sunnier spots. For any firework shows this evening, generally quite clear conditions further towards the east, but still catering for those showers in the west on and off throughout the night. A few though just pushing across the Channel Islands into southeast England as we head later on in the night as well. Underneath the starry skies though, temperatures will be dropping off quite a lot. Chilly for most of us, but particularly so for parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, where a touch of frost is possible. And again, there will be some fog lingering throughout Monday morning. But generally on the whole, it is another east-west split on Monday. Showers continuing to push in from the west, heavy at times. Eastern air is largely dry, but we could see some eventually pushing their way into East Midlands, parts of southeast England as well. Temperatures once again 10-14 degrees Celsius, but a touch fresher where you're caught in the relatively breezy conditions. Showery once again on Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives for Wednesday. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life.
your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new
It's
t-shirt.
your new
Yes, I know.
t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People